All right, let's go. Good evening. Welcome, everybody.
Hey.
Welcome, welcome.
Welcome.
Welcome y'all to the third annual Take 'em Down Everywhere conference. This is obviously very different from how we are used to gathering. Typically, we're in a room somewhere, somebody's community center, somebody's local HBCU, something like that, and bringing us all together, and we can see each other and feel each other's energy, and I can see your faces up close. But we're gonna make it happen like we've gotten accustomed to doing during this time, in this COVID time. We got a real full docket for the evening. We've got some amazing, powerful, revolutionary speakers. We want to let folks have their time to share out with us. Just want to, get on into the proceedings this evening because it is 5 after. We got a whole lot to cover. So my name is Quest. I'm of Take 'em Down NOLA. We got Take 'em Down NOLA in the building. A whole bunch of our leadership and organizers are here this evening. We are a coalition that was founded in 2015 with the purpose of removing all symbols of white supremacy as a part of the greater struggle for racial and economic justice in the city of New Orleans. I'll talk more about what our struggle looked like in a minute. But first, I want to also just do some housekeeping, acknowledge some points of why we come together tonight, and then get into the proceedings. So first off, it looks like everybody knows what to do. We're on mute. In addition to that, we want to make sure that if you got any questions when we get to the Q&A after everybody presents, you can type those in the chat and we'll go accordingly according to how folks chime in. Feel free to take notes. This is going to be a really powerhouse of information in terms of living, breathing history. Folks who have been doing the work to push us forward into this pre-revolutionary moment where we see these monuments falling down like dominoes, and it's a beautiful thing to see. And, a lot of the folks on this call had a lot to do with that. So feel free to not just take it in passing, but take some notes, because some of y'all that we've invited tonight are engaged in the struggle anew yourself. And we want you to get some of that information and be inspired. Stay connected. We will be posting some of our website, social media links, things of that nature. We'll be reiterating this. My comrade Angela's going to reiterate it at the end in terms of our monthly forums. Not only with Take 'em Down NOLA, but with some of our adjacent coalitions who teach even more political theory and whatnot that informs the way that we move. So feel free to follow us on that. And last but not least, please know that you are being recorded. So anything that you say, we may publish. We are going to publish some version of this for the public later on so that they can get some of this knowledge, but we wanted to treat this just like an organizing meeting, keep it nice and contained and intimate amongst us fellow organizers. But that which informs our work, that which informs the collective, the population outside of here that can get inspired by what we do in terms of the history that's going to be dropped here. We want them to have access to some of that. So y'all being recorded. So just keep that in mind when you're dropping some of your stories and your presentations. Just keep it above the cuff. You know what I mean? Like, we've done some things in terms of our strategizing. It's just amongst us as organizers. So if it's that kind of information, keep it to yourself. And everything else, let the people know. So again, welcome. Thank y'all for coming. Appreciate having you. We got even the babies in here this evening. I see that. I appreciate that energy, because this is what we do it for, passing it on to the youngest. Speaking of which, we got to Take 'em Down NOLA in here. Our sister Vanna, she always brings her youngin' with her. I'll see her in here tonight. Hopefully she makes it on. But in addition to us, we also have our brother Gary Chambers, from Baton Rouge. So Louisiana is doubly represented. Y'all might have heard of Gary with his viral video. Mr. Gary, I'm talking to you, Connie Chambers himself, is going to give us some live information in terms of his work up there in BR. We're going to jump from him to hear from our brother Wells Todd from Take 'em Down Jacks. So much love for Take 'em Down Jacks. They held us down for the second annual conference. We did the first one right here in New Orleans. Oh, there goes Von. I see you, Hap Kiddo. I forgot your little pseudonym. But we did our second conference in Jacksonville, and they took us all around Jacksonville. It was a beautiful couple of days. We were out there, closed it out at the beach. They took us to actually the site of a big Confederate monument that was taken down right at the beginning of this whole pre-revolutionary moment, post George Floyd's killing and the uprising we've seen around the country. So when we saw that, we were excited because we knew the work that they had been doing all of that time. We're going to jump from Jacksonville all the way to the Caribbean. I know that I saw her earlier, our sister Bella Nazaire. I hope I'm saying the name right. She's going to tell us about some of the Nazaire. She's shaking her head. Nazaire, got it. All right. Bella Nazaire, she's going to tell us about the victories they had out there in Martinique. Martinique really set it off and inspired us. We went to Martinique 2 summers ago because part of our work is not just take them down, but it's also build them up. We want to go to some of the spaces in the diaspora where our revolutionary freedom fighters have been celebrated, venerated, and lifted up. And Martinique is a living, breathing museum for that. You go down there and you see, monuments to France Fanon, Aimé Césaire, Solitude, the freedom fighting libertary freedom fighting woman who was pregnant when she pushed the French troops off of a cliff. And so we support that. We're here for that. That's the kind of work we're trying to do here in New Orleans, is get the white supremacists, imperialists, and capitalists off the cliff and away from oppressing us. And so Martinique gave us a lot of inspiration back then. And, turns out they're still doing the work now. We're excited to hear about what they're doing. We learned about some of their work over there in Martinique from a brother named Shabaka Kambon. Actually, I went down to Trinidad to speak at his Kwame Ture lecture series 3 years ago. I hope Shabaka's in the building. If he's not here, hopefully he'll get here soon. After we hear about his work with the Crossroads Freedom Project, we're going to jump all the way across the Atlantic to our sister Cleo Lake. If you heard about the monuments to Colston, Edward Colston, coming down in Bristol, UK. She was one of the founders of Countering Colston and helped create the environment for that to happen. And so we're going to jump from her all the way back, last but never least, to our sister Bree Newsome. I think if you're on this call, you don't know who Bree is, then I don't know what she's been doing. But a lot of us got our namesake from the work she did, pulling down that Confederate flag in South Carolina about 5 years ago in about a month, because we actually had an action. We had our last Take 'em Down action on the anniversary of that day. It was beautiful. And, the Take 'em Down hashtag trended after she did what she did, and we became the New Orleans version of that. I'll talk more about that in just a second, but I think I said more than enough. I'm going to pass it off to our elder, without whom we would not be doing this work. He's going to tell us about the landscape and basically where we are right now politically and geopolitically in terms of the Take 'em Down movement. So give it up. You can't hear nothing, but, put your hands up. Air clap, golf clap for Malcolm Suber. You're on mute, Malcolm.
Good afternoon, comrades. It's a pleasure to be here with you. I'm hoping to share some perspectives on where we stand in this struggle against white supremacy, this 500-year-old struggle that our people have been waging consistently, and that our enemy has been constructing consistently. As we move, they move. But the thing that has happened, our new mood in the world struggle, has descended upon the people who identified with freedom and liberation. The whole world was witness to the May 25th execution, lynching of George Floyd. That touched people to the core. And it made people finally get off their porches and get into the streets and say, I don't go along with that. I don't support that at all. And many people for the first time had their eyes opened, and they began to believe that what Black people have been saying all along about being oppressed and exploited by this racist capitalist system, that was indeed the truth. And that being the truth, of course, that means that this time, as the uprising began, and of course, Black people already knew, but this time when we rebelled, when we stood up and organized the resistance, we were met in the streets by a multinational throng of supporters, especially young white people. And for the first time in this country, there was demonstrations in all 50 states in states where they don't have more than 100 black folk. But people begin to identify, understand the racist nature of the police force, and that it was indeed organized to keep us enslaved and exploited. And that, that the United States allowed the cops to murder black people with impunity. Nobody gets punished. Except now with the technology that exists, and you got a young woman who had the bravery and the sense to stand in and record the whole event. Everybody became a witness to this execution. And if you bear witness and you got any kind of empathy in your bones, you will come out. And so basically, a movement of millions of people in the United States and across the world stood up and said that they support the Black liberation struggle in the United States, and indeed taking inspiration from the struggle of Black people for freedom and self-determination here in the United States. So that's the backdrop. The response has been rather surprising in that the billionaire capitalist corporations in this country have seemed to begin to support the Black Lives Matter movement in terms of making statements, allowing the Black athletes to make statements, and most importantly, removing the Confederate flag from NASCAR, which was a Southern invention and closely identified with the Dixie movement in this country. And so the bourgeoisie has decided that this uprising was rather serious and deep, and they'd rather make concessions to us than to have us burn down the whole damn building. And so their form of support, quote unquote, has been to endorse change, these surface changes and embracing the Black Lives Matter, embracing having discussions about racism and discrimination. And of course, this thing has kicked off a lot of struggle, people struggling to abolish the police, to defund the police. The aim, of course, is to get the police off our neck. And that is happening widely and broadly all over this country. The surprising thing, of course, is, and pleasant thing, people begin to associate the murder of Black folks with the struggle against white supremacy in all its forms. And certainly the struggle to take down the monuments, which had basically hit a low since last year in 2019, after the crazy summer that we enjoyed 5 years ago, and the Charlottesville events as well, where we got some prominence in terms of our struggle to take down these racist monuments. And then there seemed to be a lull, but certainly after the murder of George Floyd, we have a whole new contingency of folks, both official and unofficial, government actors and community actors, who have embraced the struggle to remove the white supremacy monuments from the public grounds all over this country. Even though this has been a great victory for us, we have to be sobered by the realization that even though they are falling by the dozens, there's still over 1,700 white supremacy monuments, plaques, roadside stands throughout the United States. So we still got work to do. And it's important that we understand that this work that we're doing is part and parcel of the Black liberation struggle, particularly part and parcel of the struggle in the United States for the right to self-determination of the oppressed Black nation in this country. We definitely need to increase our exposure We also have to increase the alligator tears shed by the billionaire ruling class for the oppressed Black nation. And that if they were really serious, they would embrace the struggle for reparations. And of course, they are trying to avoid any real responsibility for the oppressed and continued oppressed condition of the Black nation. But if there were any sincerity at all, they would be talking about ending the gross inequalities that exist for Black people in this country. But of course, that would cut into their profits. And since their whole motivation for all of their activity is to generate profits and realize the profits from stealing our surplus value, our labor, then of course it's important for them to give up minor things in order to save the main thing, which is their continued theft of the wealth created by the working people in the United States and all over the world. So I think it's important that as we deliberate tonight, that we think about what motivated us to take on this struggle when we seemed like some lonely voices. We were the only people talking about taking down these monuments. We were being poo-pooed by the reformist types who were saying that this would never happen. And we proved them wrong. We proved to be the vanguard in this movement. We proved to understand the importance of taking on this whole 500-year corpse that's been created by the Western imperialists. They invented white supremacy. White supremacy has been embraced as a method of rule, as a method of dividing the working people. And so we need to examine that as clearly as we can and really urge on these independent and community-based people who are taking up the slack and demanding these statues be taken down, that these street names be changed. And it would be fitting for us to issue a proclamation asserting our complete support for the Black Lives Matter movement around the death of George Floyd, and make note of the close relationship between that struggle against police terror and the struggle to remove all the symbols of white supremacy, not only throughout the South, but throughout the whole United States, and of course, worldwide. And we definitely appreciate the solidarity that's been expressed and the support that's been expressed by the peoples of the world. And we've got to understand that, in England, in South Africa, in Zimbabwe, in New Zealand, and in Australia, people are taking stands against these representations of white supremacy and the colonial project of the Europeans that was launched 500 years ago. So it's important that we continue to understand that, and that we embrace the breadth of this movement, but we need to continue to urge people to continue this fight until our public landscapes are no longer obliterated with these racist, white supremacist monuments.
Thank you for that, Malcolm. Great delineation of the landscape. This is where we are. This is where we at. The work that has been done in New Orleans has at least been done for about 40 or so years, and Malcolm has been the premier spearhead in doing that work. And even before that, it goes back to the 50s and even before that. And so we know that none of this work is new in any of our environments, any of our landscapes. And this is a really affirming moment for all of us, because we knew we was not crazy and we knew what we were talking about. But it took this long for the material conditions to deteriorate to a point where people can't help but notice that this direct connection needs to be called out. We need to act on it. So it is an exciting revolutionary moment. We do this every year in the hopes of creating an interconnected solidarity between city to city, state to state, across, oceans even, to connect the dots and recognize the fact that we've all been under the struggle. When we first got inspired to do this, we were actually getting inspired by the young folks out in South Africa who took down Cecil Rhodes. And so these connections are much deeper, much bigger than just slavery, just civil war, just antebellum period, just America. But we know white supremacy is a global project, and it's going to take global solidarity to undo it. So appreciate everybody being here. I'm going to pass it off to our comrade, Angela Kinlaw. She's going to tell us all about taking down NOLA's mission statement and principles, the reason why we do what we do.
How you doing, everybody? It's great to be on the line with you all. I just want to take a few minutes to, first and foremost, just honor everybody's presence for being on the line. We know that, in the organizing work we do, we consider everybody's time to be valuable, because we understand that the work that we're doing is requiring time and energy and emotional labor, and that's not to be taken for granted. So the fact that you've made the time to be here, just want to acknowledge that, honor that, and say thank you for it. Let me just start off by saying that in Take 'em Down NOLA, we do not in any way, shape, or form apologize for being revolutionaries. We understand that the work that we're doing is anchored in revolutionary struggle, and our purpose for existing, some people only catch the first part, but we always want to emphasize the second part, is that we exist for the purpose of removing all symbols to white supremacy from the landscape of New Orleans as a much necessary part of the struggle toward racial and economic justice. And we know that when we're doing work around symbols, that we're doing that work with the full understanding that they represent systems that are designed to exploit and oppress our people. And because we understand that connection, we're not thrown off when people challenge us with things like, well, why y'all focused on monuments? There's so many other bigger things to, we've heard it all, and we believe that we can walk and chew gum at the same time. And we believe that this work that we're doing is an entry point, not simply to remove a symbol, change a name, change a park. We want to do that, yes, but we want to do it with the full understanding that it gives an opportunity for us to push and force and elevate the consciousness of our people. If the monument simply comes down, that's one thing, and we're going to cheer and we're going to celebrate it. But if it comes down with more people understanding what it represented and why, we are in a better position to mobilize that energy into the next fight, into the next battle. And we're very, very clear that it's important that people understand why we're doing this work. Here in New Orleans, there's 17 monuments that we've identified, and there are many, many more, by the way, but there's 17 that we've identified as primary targets based on the research and the understanding. 4 of those monuments initially came down because of the initial struggle in the first 3 years, and 3 have come down recently. We have 10 more to go. And we understand that as each one of them come down, it provides an opportunity for people to assess the history that has been removed, revised, or just straight up lies have been told that haven't come through our schoolhouses, but have come through this energy on the street. It has allowed an opportunity for us to practice our principles. We say that we are doing this work, this anti-white supremacy work. We understand that that supremacy really represents mediocrity. We understand that that supremacy really represents the ways in which the people who are pushing for it represent inferiority. We recognize that, and we share that with our community. We share that with the children. We share that with the understanding that we would much rather force all of these monuments to come down and these pedestals to stay empty for as long as necessary, as a sign that even an empty pedestal is a sign of progress. And if it takes however long for the community to collectively decide what will be the replacement, so be it. Because we would much rather make sure that people are not finding replacements that are just as problematic. Replacements that represent watered down history, neoliberalism, and all the different things that ultimately aim to hinder our forward movement when it comes to the systemic work that we aim to do. So we're not thrown off by the amount of time that it takes to do this work, because it's necessary time to elevate the consciousness of the people. I also want to say that even though we have Take 'em Down NOLA, we have Build 'em Up NOLA. And the Build 'em Up NOLA part sometimes takes even more time, because it means that the work we're doing around organizing to remove symbols to white supremacy also mean that we're out here doing educational forums. At first, nobody would invite us into a classroom to speak, and now people are doing so because they're being forced to contend with these issues. It gives us a chance to get up close and personal with people who denied that this work was even important before, and be able to really push the real history, so that when people think about replacements, they're not thinking about things that basically edify the spirit of a white supremacy, elevate Black trauma, fetishize hardship toward Black people. Those are the things that, through the nuanced ways that we share this information, teach this history, and we process, allows people to have the discernment they need to make the choices that represent their communities, their schoolhouses, the streets that they live on. And that has been the most beneficial part of this work, that people are in different places throughout the city having these same conversations and doing it with the criteria that they didn't have before. And we believe that if we just share with people information, and we stop hiding the information, stop revising the information, stop watering it down for people, but just provide it, make it accessible to our people and to our children, that they will be able to think for themselves, process for themselves, and decide for themselves. It happened for us, and we believe that it can happen for all the other members in our community. We also understand that when we make this connection between symbols and systems, that as Take 'em Down NOLA has been an entry point into a lot of the struggle-oriented work and created a resurgence of that energy in the parish, it's helped us over the last 5 years to lay a foundation that's prepared us for this moment in time. So while we're fighting with all of the issues around COVID-19, simultaneously with an uprising for Black lives, this isn't a moment that we want to just let pass when the uprising starts to dwindle and people get comfortable again. We seize this moment as an opportunity to remind people that we were fighting really hard before COVID-19. We were fighting really hard before this phase of the uprising. And so it behooves us to seize this moment and channel the energy into the kind of organizing work necessary to actually transform the conditions for our people. And so while we're aiming to fight against white supremacy, we're holding ourselves accountable for the way patriarchy shows up in our environment. We're holding ourselves accountable for the ways in which capitalism shows up all through this. Even though people fought us before around the Take 'em Down work, we're also very clear that when it got sexy to some people, then it became a thing, right? And we understand that those are how movements get co-opted. Those are how movements get seized by the very powers that be, who told you, no, we won't remove it. The very next day, they cutting the ribbon, they in front of the camera talking about how grand of a move it is. And so because we are aware of it, but not consumed by it, we stay focused on the work that's needed to, again, change the material conditions of our people. So we have more that we can share about that. But I just want to wrap up by saying that that purpose for existing, removing all symbols to white supremacy from the landscape of New Orleans as a much necessary part of the struggle toward racial and economic justice, helps us hold ourselves accountable to what we mean when we say all, and what it also means, whether it's examination of the names we all have inherited on those birth certificates versus what we're seeing in terms of even the names of our entire cities, the states, and what this country represents as a whole. Because if white supremacy is an issue, if patriarchy, heteropatriarchy, and capitalism is an issue, eventually the day is gonna come where we're gonna have to contend with that red, white, and blue flag in the way in which it's been used to create chaos around the globe through imperialism. But we understand we're using every entry point to move us along the journey. So I will stop there, pass it back over to you, Quest, and we can definitely talk more later after everybody else has had a chance to share.
Got it. All right, appreciate those fiery words as always, my sister. We're gonna get into these presentations real quick. I want to set 3 parameters on that real quick. We talked about in terms of, and I've talked with all of the presenters already, but I'm gonna present it again for everybody who's here. We don't just want to talk about what you did, the struggle. That was beautiful and powerful, and that's the reason why we're here in conversation. But we also want to dig into some of the why, beyond the what and the how. All right. So when we talk about the what and the how, we're talking about a topical report. We want to know, you know, how Lee High School got its name changed, how that flag came down to South Carolina. And I think a lot of us know that story. It's been reported, but was just as interesting to us and just as necessary for our revolutionary struggle and pushing it forward. The segue from symbols to systems to start doing some of that real nitty gritty work that we all got to do in our cities, states, and towns where white supremacy manifests itself as capitalist oppression. We need to know the why. We need to know what's going on in that city budget, what's going on inside them schools and that curriculum, what's going on that were the pre-existing material conditions that necessitated us getting up there and pulling that thing down, kicking it down, what have you, because we all know that this is an entry point. And we also know that for the folks outside of here that are going to hear this later, whoever they may be, there's some analysis that we can offer to folks that'll be a teachable moment for them where they understand the connection between symbols and systems. Though we're very joyed to see that we don't have to do a lot of that preaching and lecturing no more for people to get it. We see folks, you know, lighting up a police precinct, and then in the same fell swoop they knock down a monument. We know that the connection has been made. And when we see folks who are, you know, knocking down a monument, and then they're calling immediately for the defunding of police, for the reallocation of budget money to go to a different place, we know the connection has already been made. And that's a joyous revolutionary moment for us because we have been pushing to make those connections all this time before all of these bodies stacked up. And so I'm gonna just go ahead and get into talking about taking down NOLA in terms of what we did, how we did it, and why we did it. And at the end of every presentation, we're also hoping that you can share with us what your local landscape looks like right now. You might have heard some of the allusions we just made to some of these, you know, Negro misleaders, the petty bourgeois, the folks who have hovered around us like vultures all of this time and picked at all our arguments. But as soon as it starts looking sexy, like Angela said, they want to pick at all of the grant money that drops down because of the type of landscape we've created with our labor, which has never been about money. It's never been about a comeuppance, but it's been about creating a liberated landscape for our people. So I'm gonna go ahead and get into this report on Take 'Em Down. I'm gonna try to be quick, and then I'm gonna pass it off to Gary. You're on deck. We're gonna hear from you in a second, brother, but let me go ahead and kick us off. So I'm sharing my screen. I hope y'all can see this. We started off in the year 2014, technically 2015, the moment of Mike Brown's murder and his non-indictment by the police in Ferguson, the non-indictment by of Darren Wilson, rather, is what led to us marching in the street. And we started off as a Black Lives Matter movement. It was actually myself and a few younger organizers, none of whom are here now, but that is what led us to ultimately getting into the street. And that day demanded for Robert Lee to come down. That whole analysis in terms of even that moment where we were trying to connect the dots between a white supremacist symbol and the itchy trigger finger of all of the police that murder us was given context too because of revolutionary elders like Malcolm and Leon Waters, who's not with us this evening. But these guys have been talking about this stuff for decades. I had learned it from them about 3 years prior at a random, lecture at the New Orleans Public School Library. And in that presentation, they presented a map of the city that looks something like this one that you see on the right over here. And basically what it showed was all of these white supremacist monuments that littered the city landscape. Now, for me, that was a light bulb moment. I come to New Orleans by way of Brooklyn when I was a young boy, about 12 years old. The very same year Malcolm X comes out, Spike Lee joint. Matter of fact, Spike Lee was a neighbor right around the corner. They shot the video for Revolution. It was a very different cultural climate, to say the least. And when I came to New Orleans in 93, there were 424 murders that year. And the next year, in 94, there were 389 murders. So again, we talk symbols and systems. You're talking about the systemic reflection of what I could not diagnose through my young boy mind, but I just thought that they was about it, because that's what Master P said. I just thought that they was getting it popping down south, and I could not understand why this culture of violence was as prolific as it was. But when I saw these monuments, it was a light bulb moment for me, because I realized, damn, they actually have celebrated and praised the people that put us in these conditions. And I couldn't do the rest of the math yet. I didn't know about the city budget. I didn't know that the city budget actually invests 2/3 of its money into prisons, cops, jails, and reactive measures. But I did know that in any environment that's going to celebrate and praise the people that told me and my people that we were 3/5 human, that they obviously didn't have our best interests in mind. And so that was what I understood in about 2011 or so, when Malcolm presented it to me and to us in that lecture room. What I would learn that day is that there were several school names, at least 26 or so, which had been changed back in the 90s when I came down, when it was the murder capital. This is work that Malcolm and a lot of elders had done during that time. And so this conversation was not new, but it's again, the kind of thing that was being pushed forward only by some revolutionary vanguards, and the rest of the city would be left ignorant to it intentionally, because the petty bourgeois would remain silent to it unless they were pushed to get off their behinds and do something. And so when that work started with taking down NOLA, we started off in 2014, officially kicked off in 2015. We were brought into the work, or inspired to do further work, because of a project called 13 Flag Funerals, where we burned Confederate flags in front of this former location of Robert E. Lee. And, when I heard the opportunity to do that, of course, I wanted to get down with it. Within, I want to say, 2 or 3 weeks of us burning our Confederate flag, the massacre in South Carolina happened. And, once again, we find ourselves right in the pocket in terms of the timing, just synchronistic. And before you knew it, it was a national conversation. It was a global conversation. And thanks to our sister Bree Newsome, who climbed up that pole and pulled that wretched flag down. Now, the thing we had been saying since last year, the things that elders have been saying for decades, was finally getting validation. And so we pushed from 2015 summer all the way into that December, and that resulted in the city taking down 4 of the monuments. But of course, that was, that was a bone they were throwing us, because we had been saying since our first actions, take down Robert E. Lee and all symbols of white supremacy. We didn't say we want some, we didn't say we want piecemeal, liberation. We said we want all of them down. And it's a beautiful thing to see in this moment that the people are really realizing that, all is not a stretch. It's an understatement, actually, in terms of the things we got to do. The least you can do is get these symbols out of our face. So the ones that came out that year were Robert E. Lee, the Liberty Monument, which is terribly named. We call it the White Supremacy Monument. Y'all can look this kind of stuff up. I may try to put some links up in the chat as we're doing the Q&A. But the Liberty Monument was a tribute to the 1874 Battle of Liberty Place, where white supremacist paramilitary called the Crescent City White League, which is basically the Ku Klux Klan for New Orleans. New Orleans got to do everything different, so they got a fancy name. But it was a paramilitary troop that murdered 3,000 Black people during Reconstruction. And in one of those instances, they had tried to take over the entire city, and they successfully murdered 11 Black and white civilian officers. And the impact of their terrorism eventually led to them reclaiming the state as their own and kicking out the Reconstruction government, which had a Black lieutenant governor by the name of P.B.S. Pinchback, by the way. And so these are not just symbols of, a moment, but they symbolize terror. And that terror does more than just reify racial supremacy, but it has alleged supremacy, but it also has material affect in terms of government. They get to take the government back over by way of this. And so that was that one. You got PGT Beauregard here. He was the only one who was actually from New Orleans. There was actually only 2 statues of our 17. There were 2 people from Louisiana. People like Jefferson Davis might have set foot in Louisiana once, and Robert E. Lee never set foot in Louisiana. But regardless, all of them had to go. Our mayor at the time, Mitch Landrieu, jumped his behind into the conversation, and perfect example of, petty bourgeois class trying to co-opt the conversation that's been going on for the longest time. He's the same guy who, when he was lieutenant governor in the 90s, voted to keep the Confederate flag on the back of a license plate, and claimed to know nothing about what any of these monuments meant until his good buddy Wynton Marsalis, pulled his coattails and said, I need you to take these down for the 300th, anniversary. We cried bull, because we know that, and this is just some insider stuff, but this is how, organizing goes. And we all know that these folks take the platforms and positions they do and then they, you know, work quietly and secretly behind closed doors to try to shut down the type of work that we're doing. And so, nonetheless, he put that little 4 out. He's still doing his little book tours or whatever, profiting off the moment. That's cute. But anyway, that was 3 years ago. And like Malcolm said, we hit a lull after that. We've continued doing our work, and we've taken on all symbols and been doing a lot of communal conversations around other facets of white supremacy that still remain, not to exclude blackface at Mardi Gras by way of the, you know, Zulu troop. All black Mardi Gras troop that still wears blackface. That's a whole nother conversation we do entire forums and lectures on. But for now, suffice it to say that all of the activity of the last couple of months has brought the consciousness back up, has brought the movement back to the fore. And we see these three who just came down in the last month, which is beautiful to see because we watched our people do it. And, you know, it's the kind of thing where in this moment, the actions that we're doing in the street, which I know all of us are attending in our respective cities, all of us, some of us are leading and organizing. I see you, Wells. I know that y'all been doing that out in Jacksonville. When thousands of people get in the street, this is a key opportunity to just tell them, do the thing. Just do the thing we've been talking about all this time. You know what I'm saying? Like, and we're getting inspired by seeing people in Colston do it. I really hope my sister Cleo was on here tonight. By seeing our people in all around the country. You know what I'm saying? I don't have to meet you for you to be my people if you're up here doing this kind of work. We all in solidarity. So we got John McDonough down. John McDonough was like our local Colston. We had an entire town named after this clown. He was the biggest slaver in America during this time. And he had plantations here in Baltimore, originally from Baltimore, and to this day still have schools named after him. There used to be this horrible ritual where it was called Founders Day. Black and white children had to come out and lay wreaths at his feet to commemorate him. And of course, the black children had to wait and come after the white children. And when they did so, they had to stand in the hot sun to come lay wreaths at the altar of this white supremacist. So due to a lot of the consciousness we've been expanding and pushing in our actions, people took it in their own hands, literally. We love that. This is the other one who was actually from Louisiana. His name is Charles Didier Drew, the first one to die in the Confederacy. We could care less, and he is down as well. 7 down, 10 to go. We still have 10 left. Our second mantra after take down Robert E. Lee and all symbols of white supremacy is we can't get no satisfaction till they take down Andrew Jackson. Y'all feel free to spread that. Y'all can take that all the way around the country and hopefully not around the world, because I hope Andrew Jackson ain't nowhere outside of here. You should be here in the first place. We already know. Matter of fact, Wells, y'all run with that because y'all got a whole city to claim in terms of Andrew Jackson. Tired, ratchet ass. Get him up out of here. Disgusting. Anyway. We've got several of these monuments remaining in our city. I'm not going to get into this whole list. We could talk about that later. But that's the what and that's the how, but this is the why. I mentioned it earlier. When we talk about why New Orleans was the murder capital of the world, why New Orleans to this day is second, but for most of this time it's been the #1 carceral state in the world's history, as in America's #1, Louisiana's #1 in America, New Orleans is #1 in Louisiana. We have more incarceration per capita than any place in the world has ever had. And it's because we went from being a plantation city, one of the top ports for slavery, to being a plantation economy. And that's where we get into the other facets of it. We don't have graphs for the rest of this stuff, but we do have a 53% poverty rate. You would think with half the people living in poverty, you would put some of this money into job development. So God forbid people would have places they could work on a livable wage. But instead we've got an $8.7 billion tourism industry, #1 in the world, while we're the #1 carceral state. This doesn't happen by mistake, this happens by design. So for all the things that I was sensing when I was seeing all of them damn monuments, this is what the organizing work led me to understand and discover. I get excited talking about this because there are so many movements bubbling up now in our city, and all they need is to connect some of these dots. Some of them have already made the connections in terms of, I don't like my school name. I don't like the microaggressions. But what if we found out how these microaggressions are systemically upheld through budgets that reify white supremacy, and have your principal or your CEO thinking that they can walk around pompous, thinking that they're better than you because there is a whole budget that is substantiating that myth. And so we're talking about 1 out of 2 people living in poverty. You wonder why we get it how we live, as we say down here. You're talking about people who live, 1 out of 5 people working in the hospitality industry that makes that $9 billion and most of them don't have benefits or a livable wage. So we're talking about a plantation economy to this day, and that's the reason why we're in the situations that we're in. We have absolutely no mercy or apology for our strategic and precise attack of this system as it is. All of these coalitions that you see right here developed out of the last couple of years of organizing directly out of taking down NOLA. Very proud of that because of the fact that when we look around our city, we do not have a lot of revolutionary organizations that are anchored in revolutionary theory that understands that capitalism is the economic vehicle that sustains white supremacist oppression. And so through the New Orleans Workers Group, who's been spearheading most of the actions that we've been doing in this last couple of months, we've been able to help people connect those dots, symbols, the systems. Through the New Orleans People's Assembly, we've been able to help people connect the dots between all of the different facets of oppression throughout the city and fight for some of the things that need to replace the systems that are in place, and most specifically the campaign for the residents of Gordon Plaza, which has taken over a lot of the work in the last couple of years because we have Black folks who've been living on toxic soil for 30 years, and that's environmental racism 101. And we understand that this is the kind of stuff they would never pull on white folks, but they sold all of these Black folks trying to live the middle-class American dream land on a toxic Superfund site. And so People's Assembly keeps that work going. Last but not least, New Orleans Hospitality Workers Alliance, who have been doing the work, especially now, to be in solidarity with our essential workers and help fight for their hazard pay, their PPE, their livable wage, their basic workers' rights that they're going to need in order to survive this pandemic. So all three of these coalitions have grown out of the symbols, the system type of mission that Take 'em Down NOLA initiated 5 years ago. And their work is just as, if not more important than what we put forth back then, because our work has been an entry point to folks actually being able to fight the real good fight in terms of decapitating capitalism. So that's some of our people in the street. And I'm gonna close it out. I know I'm running kind of long, but what it looks like now in terms of the response, we got this little meme we put out. We always got to clown city council because of course they have responded to this like the petty bourgeois always do. They like to come out to our actions. They like to act as though they're in solidarity, but what they're trying to do is co-opt our narrative. These are the ones who are doing that quote unquote work at this point. They put up a renaming commission and they want to have 3 months to talking about doing something. And we're like, what you need a renaming commission for? You got people already ready to take the stuff down and they're doing it for free. But you need a $2 million contract so you can pay half of it to a security agency to surveil us. That's the kind of stuff they did when the first war came down. And so there's that piece. And then there's also the fact that, when you talk about renaming this stuff, I've been watching some of the stuff that's happening in Baton Rouge. They want, like Angela was saying earlier, a nice vague neoliberal type of, erasure replacement name. I don't need Liberty Lane if I don't know what liberty is. I don't need Freedom Hall if we haven't actually defined freedom and how we get to it. And so what we want is, the kind of people and the kind of movements to be commemorated that actually show how to get to liberty, show how to get to freedom. Let's commemorate Juan San Malo. Let's commemorate the 1811 enslaved people's revolt and the people who actually fought on behalf of our liberation. So all that to say, we don't rock with the petty bourgeois. Their game is old and tired, and we know exactly what it is. We rock with the people. These are some of the actions we've been doing in the last couple of months. And we've been bringing our message directly to the streets so folk can understand what we mean by take them down and build them up. So that's us in a nutshell. This is some of our demands. We want the job finished. We want our ordinance up. We want it to be a community-driven process where we can do public education and get folks to actually know some of this revolutionary history that we want to replace it. We don't care how long that takes. It's better to take a year or years than to, rush it up with fake names with a, renaming committee. And then last but not least, we want the abolition of the police. And we know that they're not going to do that overnight. So they can start with giving us the money they owe us and flip the budget. And so out of that $642 million of our tax dollars, the 63% is going to prison, college, jails, and reactive measures needs to be flipped and given to children and families job development and get a crumbs to the cops. Because if everybody got what they need, we don't need police. And I'm gonna close it off with a shout out to some of our people who came out tonight. This movement has led to others getting in the street as well. and fighting to have Robert E. Lee Boulevard changed in the name of the people in their own community, not waiting for the city to do it. Fighting to dismantle New Orleans Museum of Art, which has been practicing all kind of microaggressive, systemic, oppressive, white supremacist racism. Fighting to get the name of Lushery removed, which is, who was a Confederate supporter back in his day. Fighting to recreate the culture in Noka, which has been white supremacist, white liberal, BS for the longest time. And those are just 4 of about 8 different campaigns that have popped up, and we're excited to see it. Thank y'all for coming, and we hope y'all getting some inspiration, information tonight that's gonna help push your work forward. So I'm gonna close out right there, and I wanna pass it off to our brother Gary Chambers off in Baton Rouge. Because we're running kind of long, I don't wanna get deep into the bios tonight. I thank y'all for sending that to me, but let me just give y'all a couple of words on Gary real quick. Gary is a Baton Rouge native, co-founder of the Rouge Collection. It's a publication geared towards issues of race and Black progress. He's at the forefront of community discussion. Y'all probably saw him in that city council meeting where he let Connie have all the business. And he said, I'm talking to you, Connie. So right now, he's about to talk to y'all. Go on, Brother Gary.
Thank you, and I greet you all in solidarity this evening. Bear with me, I'm exhausted, but I'm here. So a little bit about how I got into the work. We effectively 4 years ago attempted to try to change the name of Lee High School. I am a native of Baton Rouge, born and raised here, spent all of my life here except for 5 years in Jacksonville, Florida, and really just recognized as an adult that our community was inequitable, and started seeing those things from a vantage point of what Baton Rouge really is and what we stand for as a city, and not really just being willing to be quiet about it. So we started this business 8 years ago called the Rouge Collection. Our objective was to be this diverse version of a magazine that was oh so white. And as we went out to try to do business in Baton Rouge, we realized that most of the folks here didn't want to do business with young Black people. And so that was our first kind of confrontation to the reality of the community that we lived in. And I met some brothers along the way, Cleve Dunn, Edmund Jordan, who, as I became more enlightened and woke up more to what was going on, starting with the death of Trayvon Martin, followed by the death of Mike Brown. And so both of those things happened while in the infancy of the Rouge Collection, and probably the infancy of my advocacy. And in the beginning, I just wrote on the platform because that was the platform that I had to speak to the issues. And so I wrote about the death of Trayvon Martin and what that made me feel like when George Zimmerman was not convicted. And then when Mike Brown was killed, I held a town hall with the Rouge Collection to kind of engage the community around the discussion, because though Baton Rouge is the capital city of Louisiana, the second Blackest state in America, there are still deep roots of racism within this community, even in a majority Black city, where we have had a Black mayor since 2004. We're not as blessed as New Orleans to have had so many Black mayors, and that's questionable when you look at the legacy of some Black leaders. So I appreciate you guys. Being very direct about what I call secretaries of Negroes Affairs, folks who they appoint to positions with the hopes that they will liberate us into a new form of slavery in what is what I see it as. So to fast forward, we get through these incidents that happen other places, and then in 2016, Alton Sterling happens here in Baton Rouge. But before Alton Sterling, there was Travis Stevenson. He was shot 26 times by the sheriff's department here in Baton Rouge, and his killers walked free. Followed that up with a young brother named Jacoby Davis was at Earth Day here in Baton Rouge, and a police officer kneeled on him, punched him in the back of the head, and there was a second officer on him named Blaine Salamone. Blaine Salamone, within less than 90 days of Earth Day, would be the killer of Alton Sterling. I talked about every one of those issues, as well as we started the fight to try to change the name of Lee High School, because I've got a 10-year-old daughter now that is in public schools here in Baton Rouge, and the track that she is on would propel her to Lee High School, what was Lee High School, had she stayed on this track, right? And so her mother and I had this conversation once. Her mom was a graduate of Lee High, and I told her, well, listen, she ain't going to Lee unless they change the name of the school, because I'm not sending my daughter to a school named after a racist, bigoted white man so she can run around the rest of her life telling people this white man's name is where she graduated high school. And so some folks had a conversation together, and we pressed the issue because there was a brand new building being built with Lee High School where they spent $60 million to build a brand new Lee. And we thought an opportune time to change the name is when you're going to put up a new sign because it's a new building. And we went before the school board, attempted to get them to change the name. And long story short, the answer was no. In a city that is 56% Black, where the school system is 81% Black, the school system, the school board has a majority white board. There are 9 members, 5 white Republicans, 4 Black Democrats. So if you need to understand what gerrymandering is, if you need to understand what that level of discrimination looks like, Baton Rouge is one of the greatest examples in America. We are one of the most segregated cities in America. And it is not by accident or coincidence, it is intentional. And when we were denied, we did not stop. I was determined that my daughter is not going to go to this school. And with the recent wave of folks going after this name, there was a bold young Black school board member named Darius Landis who was willing to bring it back in this climate that we changed the name. I went out and did a video at Lee High School, but more insulting than just the name of Lee, every street, every single street surrounding Lee High School is named after a Confederate general. The school is still on Lee Drive, though the name is now Liberty High School, which is, we attempted to get PBS Pinchback, the first Black governor in America, for his name to bear the walls of that school. And the school system just could not bear to give us Black folks that kind of validation behind them having to suck up all of their emotions and vote to take his name off the building. And Connie, the school board member who America has seen me roast, this was not our first run-in, nor was this really my first time laying into government officials, because this is just the one that went viral, right? And so to organizers and all of you who do this work, and I'm sure you can relate to this, there are moments or inflection moments that our voices get lifted a little louder than everyone else's. But I believe that that happens to those of us who are consistently concerned about the liberation of our people and committed to the work of liberating our people from every form of racism and bigotry that we have to deal with in this country. And so those moments really just inspired us to continue moving forward. And so we're grateful that the name is gone, but we still live in a city where the streets, Ross, Pickett, Whitehaven, there's even a street named Whitehaven, right? And no lie, while we were filming the video about the street names and the changing of the name, and we shared that on social media, 100,000 people watched that. We got thousands of emails sent to the school board over the last month that pushed for them to do what they did. And while we were filming the video, a white woman named Karen, no lie, walks out her door while we're shooting on Pickett and Whitehaven. And she says, you know, isn't it terrible that these streets are named after all these horrible people? And I just knew that Karen was coming to give me the business. I just knew she was coming, you know, be a Karen on me, but she was not. She was a kind soul, but she shared some information with me about when she purchased her home in 1989, that there was a deed restriction that said you could not sell the home to Black people, right? We were not referred to as politely in the deed restriction. And I believe that, and we're doing the research now to find out, do these deed restrictions still exist, even though they are unconstitutional, if they are still within the deed restrictions of these properties that are sold. And we're talking about, excuse me, homes that are $400,000 and $500,000 that lace these streets, right? The neighborhood is called South Downs. South Downs is named after a plantation in another part of Louisiana. So the entire neighborhood, the streets, the framework, and even the legal documents of the residents of the area were racist. And so anybody who tells you that this was not intentional, that these things were not done very methodically, thought out in a way to suppress and oppress Black people, they're lying to us. And we should not give them any credence or any respect. In the words of Fred Hampton, I am a revolutionary and I do not apologize for it. I believe that revolutionary change is necessary. When you talk about Baton Rouge, we have a Black woman as our mayor, Sharon Weston Broom, but we still have a budget, a $900 million budget, where only less than 5% of the contracts in city parish government go to Black-owned businesses in a city that is 56% Black. When we talk about a police department in Baton Rouge that killed Alton Sterling, since the death of Alton Sterling, there was Jordan Frazier, who was shot 3 times in the back while running away from Yusef Ahmadi. Yusef Ahmadi was then given his job back, allowed to stay on the force. He did that in 2017. On the birthday of Alton Sterling, Yusef Ahmadi killed Jordan Frazier with 3 shots to the back. A year later, after Hiller Moore, the cowardice district attorney here in Baton Rouge, did not jail Yusef Ahmadi, Yusef Ahmadi remained a police officer, and a year later, in August of 2018, he shot at a young brother named Raheem Howard. Raheem Howard also was running away from him. The difference was he was fast enough to get away from the bigot who was trying to kill him, and he survived. He survived long enough to, when they arrested him, he screamed out while they were taking him to TV that he didn't have a gun, that he didn't do it, that he was innocent. And folks like myself saw this young brother, and you could hear the innocence in his voice. I don't need anybody to tell me that he wasn't guilty. I could hear that the brother wasn't guilty. And we activated and we began to make phone calls. I called the mayor, I called the chief, we leaned in. And when we investigated, we found out that there was only 1 gunshot. Yusef Ahmadi said that Raheem Howard had shot at him. This young brother was going to go to jail for attempted murder of a police officer. And he was innocent. When the video came out, this officer had turned his body camera off, he had turned his dash camera off, and he was intentionally, in my opinion, trying to kill somebody because he did not want to be recorded. But for a rear dash camera, which is in the back seat of the cop car, that was recording audio, we heard that there was a single gunshot, that there were not 2 weapons, but only 1 weapon and 1 gunshot. And Yusef Ahmadi was found to have lied. But because the systems are so corrupt, and when you talk about defunding the police department, you got to understand how corrupt the police departments still are, that there was a loophole in the investigation. Hiller Moore still did not charge him. He still did not face any criminal charges. And because the department brought him to a interrogation without his lawyer, right? After he was fired, he was given his job back and allowed to resign. So potentially he could go become a cop somewhere else in America because he was not fired. He was allowed to resign from his position. And so if you want to know what is Baton Rouge, what it looks like, that's what it is on its face. And that's why I fight. That's why those of us in this community like Gino McLaughlin, Eugene Collins, Cleve Dunn, folks who have raised up and used their voices, my brother Donnie Rose, who has been eloquent in his platforms to speak and encourage us in the way that his gift does. We got to know that we are justified in our fight, that we are justified in our cause, but we got to know the facts, right? In God we trust, everybody else bring data. The data helps us have a narrative that is ironclad, that we can go and do this work. And so for me, while I am excited that the name of Lehigh is changed, that is just one step on the fight of what we got to do. Much like you all, I am working to help them push to change the names of all of the streets there. But that's just 7 to 10 streets out of probably 80 or more streets in Baton Rouge that are named after Confederate generals, because we have entire subdivisions that are named. Hermitage, another subdivision here off Guardian Lane, off Burbank, that leads away from LSU. Every street in that subdivision is named after Confederate general. And when we think about those things, I don't just want to tear them down. I want to lift up the names of Oscar Dunn, right, who was the first black lieutenant governor elected to Louisiana. I want to lift up the name of PBS Pinchback, who was a black senator, state senator, who became president of the state senate, who then became lieutenant governor when Oscar Dunn died, and then became the governor of Louisiana when the governor was removed for a period of about 6 weeks, that PBS Pinchback was the governor. And it was 100 years before Douglas Wilder becomes the governor of Virginia to give us another black governor in America. We have had only 4 or 5 black governors in the history of this country, And to believe that is acceptable. And I'll end with saying that my vision for us is to build a new Black South. 55% of black folks live in the Deep South already. I want to have conversations with all our cousins in California and Detroit and New York and everywhere else and say, we ain't got to go to Africa, just come back home to the South. And let's take it over, and let's build education systems, and let's build a justice system, because there is not a justice system currently. Let's build a community where, and we're not evicting white folks, we're telling black folks come home so that we can build the community that our ancestors attempted to. Because when you look at what PBS Pinchback and Oscar Dunn and all of those folks did, there were 40+ black folks elected to the state legislature during Reconstruction, right? And if they had the wisdom, the knowledge to say, let's go take this power, we don't have a single black person elected statewide in Louisiana. And one of the questions that I think we should critically ask ourselves as Southerners, right, as black Southerners, is how does Michigan have a black person as lieutenant governor? How does Wisconsin have a black person as lieutenant governor? How does Kentucky have a black attorney general? How do all of these states with a smaller black population per capita than Louisiana or Mississippi have black folks elected statewide and not in the Deep South? It is because white folks have always been willing to give us a token position in order to say, oh, we're not like those folks down there, right? But what they recognize is that down here in the South, we don't have the capacity to take one, we can take them all. We can take every level of government if we are organized, if we are strategic, and if we believe in ourselves. And so I believe in you. I hope that you believe in me as we do this work to liberate our people. As always, do good, seek justice, and keep pushing, my brothers and sisters.
Awesome. Thank you, my brother. Appreciate you, man. I've been hearing about the work for a minute, and it's really powerful to hear a lot of the details of how you got to where you got and where y'all trying to go with that work. And I love that piece about the 55%. And I'm just thinking about y'all being 90 minutes from us and some of the solidarity we can build in terms of the work we already doing in New Orleans and the work that y'all are doing up there, and ways that we can be in support of one another. So yeah, we got a lot to build, but we do not have a lot of time. So I want to go ahead and get on to our next person, another brother from the South, or not from the South, like myself, coming from up north, but we both Southern black men at this point. I'm gonna just go ahead and pass it off to our brother Wells Todd, native New Yorker, been in a class struggle since the late 1970s, connecting them dots between symbols and systems, letting us know what's being done to the workers in the ways that it reflects the plantation economy to this day. And I'm gonna stop riffing because I can't seem to get this bio up. I'm gonna let you speak for yourself. Wells, tell us about Take 'em Down, Jax. You're on mute, Will.
Okay. Can you hear me now? Okay. So we are Take 'em Down here, and we started about 3 years ago. And we were aiming, our targets were the statue in Hemming Park and a statue in Confederate Park. The statue in Hemming Park was given to the city in the 1800s by Hemming, who was a white supremacist and slave owner. The statue in Confederate Park was erected to celebrate the suffering and struggle of the white Southern woman. So those were two of the statues we wanted to take down. And we can throw Andrew Jackson in the mix. There are people here who are anxious to even change the name of this city. So what we've seen, oh, I need to make this message to you. The RNC has been canceled in Jacksonville. The RNC has been canceled.
Awesome.
And we were going to have a welcoming committee for them. But they have decided not to come to Jacksonville. So we have also been struggling to change school names. We have 6 school names named after white supremacist slave owners and officers in the Confederate Army. One is Joseph Finnegan, it's an elementary school, Stonewall Jackson Elementary School, Jeff Davis Middle School, Kirby Smith, J.E.B. Stewart, and Robert E. Lee High. The talk around town is that Robert E. Lee is the next target. I need to back up a little bit because a number of years ago, the Jacksonville Progressive Coalition fought and got the name of Nathan Bedford Forrest taken off his school. We had some actions with the Klan and did some campaigning for that, and that finally happened with the help of the community. So coming into this resistance that is happening in this country and in Jacksonville, I need to tell y'all, we had the first demonstration that we had was at police headquarters. And we were expecting maybe 50 people, which would be a lot for Jacksonville. 3,000 to 4,000 people came out. And the majority of them were white, young, old, brought their kids. It was a sight to see. And we gave history lessons as we spoke regarding white supremacy and how it is affecting all of us economically, socially, and talked about capitalism, talked about socialism. So let's look at some of the material conditions that exist in Jacksonville at this point. And this is another driving force that brought these people out, like it's doing across the country. We have 50 years of economic exploitation, crumbling housing and schools, lack of infrastructure, absence of Black-owned businesses, gentrification, police brutality, and this is just to name a few issues. Now, of course, this goes back hundreds of years because we've had that boot on our neck for 500 years. But in 50 years ago, there was a consolidation of the city. They brought in all these outside counties to make this one of the largest landmass cities in America. And they did that because the structure of Jacksonville was turning from white to black. The African American community was going to outnumber the white community in Jacksonville. And the white supremacists here, they were not going to go for that. So they devised this trickery and made promises to the black community, and none of those promises have been kept. So we see that still happening today. These demonstrations have forced the white power structure to come forward and go on TV with two activists in the community to try to explain why they can't do X, Y, and Z. The mayor and the sheriff got on TV and really showed this community what they're all about. The mayor had been laughing at us, had been calling us names around removal of these statues. And we spent, like I said, we spent 3 years fighting this, trying to get this done. So, so we have these huge demonstrations in Jacksonville. So in the early morning hours, the mayor decides to take down the statue in Hemming Park. He does this because of the pressure of the people turning out and the Jaguar football players, the black football players who came out and did a rally. So he comes out that afternoon to address the crowd that's outside. Maybe 100, 150 people. And he doesn't get the response he thought he was going to get. People are demanding and screaming, show us the videos. We've had a number of young people killed here. A student from Tallahassee came home, got stopped for a traffic violation, and ends up dead. None of these murders that have taken place have any of the cops been tried here in Jacksonville. And no footage has been shown of any of these body cams that they have. So when the mayor is speaking, we can't really hear what he's saying because people are chanting and they're saying, show us the body cams, take down the other statues. I mean, no justice, no peace. No justice, no peace, no killer police, no racist police. Then he decides that he's going to march over to the courthouse. Well, he has a throng of police officers, all in their uniforms, with him. And as they take off, the whole crowd is behind them and in between them and all over them, chanting, no justice, no peace, no racist police, all up in the policeman's face. So he marches off to the courthouse and then he marches back. On his way back, he made the mistake of going up a handicap ramp and people blocked him on both ends. So he couldn't get through. So he was held up there trying to explain himself to a number of people before they let him out. And we haven't heard anything from him since. He hasn't removed the second statue. He hasn't removed the memorials. And we've got something for him tomorrow. We are going to have a press conference on the steps of City Hall to connect the dots between these statues and memorials, white supremacy, capitalism, imperialism, and colonialism. We have a number of different organizations that we have asked to speak. and that'll be going off at 10 o'clock in the morning. Another issue here in Jacksonville that's been going on for some time, like in New Orleans and around the country, is how much money the sheriff gets to be able to occupy and terrorize the African American community. He gets 40% of the budget. And he's asking for another $100 million, which would bring him up to about $481 million to the police. You know, we go before the city council and just jab at them. We've got, you know, like everywhere, we've got a handful of African Americans on the city council, and they do absolutely nothing. And so this money that's going to the police, we want it to be rerouted. We want it taken from the police, and we have a people's budget that the organization Jacksonville Community Action Committee will present tomorrow on the steps of City Hall. And that's going to be what we are working towards. We want that defunding the police. We want to re-energize social programs and move on from there. So what we have been doing is connecting the dots. Every chance we get, we connect the dots. White supremacy, we understand where that came from, and we understand the notion behind it. Imperialism, we speak about that. And we also talk about colonialism and how it is affecting the African American community right here in the United States. To have these names on our elementary schools is the first step of indoctrination into accepting white supremacy. You got Joseph Finnegan on an elementary school. You got Jeff Davis on a middle school. I brought this up at a city council meeting. I'm sorry, at a school board meeting and a city council meeting, but at school board meetings. We go to school board meetings and demand that they teach the truth about Southern history, the civil rights movement, white supremacy. And what I've been focusing on is explaining to the city council that when you don't educate our children with the fact, one fact, that there were 1,500 Black elected officials during Reconstruction, and you don't talk about that, and you don't talk about the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment that was brought about while they were in office. You don't talk about that. When you don't talk about what African Americans have provided this country, when you don't talk about that, when you leave us out of the history of this country, you are creating white supremacists. You are creating that notion that this is a white country, that it was built by whites, and when you bring up something, we don't really know how to help you because you haven't done anything for this country. So we keep bringing that up. So, like I said, tomorrow is going to be a real fun day. We're going to see how many people come out, especially with this news that the RNC is not going to be here. I'm thinking we're going to have a crowd. I hand it back to you.
Appreciate you, comrade. Thank you for the contributions to the struggle. Jayville always reminds me of New Orleans in the worst ways, from the city budget to the murder capital. you know, systems and symbols, material conditions. They make the equation, and then we get caught inside of the results. So thank y'all for pushing back on that. Good luck tomorrow. I look forward to hearing the report. We got at least 3 reporters left, 3 speakers left. I don't think our sister Cleo made it, unfortunately. There is a doc that just came out on the BBC about their work out there, actually, and I might be able to drop the link inside of the chat box so you still get some catch up on what happened in Bristol. But I'm gonna go ahead off and hop us over the water real quick. Our sister out in Martinique, I always get excited and geeked about this. One thing I love about what this work has done for us is it's expanded our connections to the diaspora, and that's what we're doing tonight, right? Understanding how all of our fights and struggles are connected, but this is really where it all starts, you know what I mean? Straight off of the west coast of Africa, this is the first place he was dropped, and they always call the walls the top of the Caribbean. So we have a lot in common with our brothers and sisters down there, and what they're doing is nothing less than revolutionary and inspirational. So we want to hear about it. We're going to hear from our sister, Bella Nazaire, and I will drop her bio in the chats. Go for it, Bella.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. So I'm Bella from Martinique, and what I have to say to you tonight is that when you live in a place like Martinique, the challenge is really like different because we are still under French rule. We're not independent. We're not in a bigger space that's been like mixing white people, black people, like you have in America, because we're in a tiny, tiny little space. And in that tiny space, the biggest problem that we've had is the illusion of being at home, like the lies that have been spun to make us believe that this is our space, when in fact it's a space that is controlled by the French government and also by the descendants of the slave owners that enslaved our ancestors. They're still here and they're still in power. And until everybody gets to that place where they understand that this is the reality, our challenge into like, you know, making people understand the necessity to remove symbols, to remove, you know, to push people out, trying to push them out is going to be like very, very tough. And we've had people, you know, try to break statues or, you know, rename streets and stuff for decades. And the problem is that at first, because of the whole system that we have, which is French Education Ministry administering our school systems and administering our TVs, administering everything, you couldn't get the information to the people that this is a symbol that they need to get rid of. And in 1991, some people went and cut off the head of the statue of Joséphine de Beauharnais. Joséphine, also known as the French Empress, you know, the wife of Napoleon. And the statue had been there for, like, I don't know, forever, in the middle of Fort-de-France, which is the capital city of Martinique. And nobody thought much about it, you know? We were walking past her every day, like, nobody thought it was a problem. And then someday, boom, somebody cut the head, and the people were shocked. They thought, oh my God, this is horrible, this is a catastrophe. They didn't think, oh, this is great. They were like horrified because they've been told for decades that this is our empress, but she was not ours. She's a descendant of slave owners. And I'm sure she herself had slaves when Napoleon brought back slavery. So she's not our anything besides our oppressor. So people have to get there. And recently, it's been a little bit clearer to a lot of younger people because, you know, you have a few organizations, one of which is the CNR Martinique, who have been trying to educate people more about what's going on, why we're still oppressed, why things are difficult here, what we're not supposed to be okay with and everything. And more young people, like 20-something young people, are starting to question the system we're living in. And they're not patient like we've been. We've been patient long enough. We've talked, we've pleaded, we've marched, everything, and it didn't work. And now they're angry, these young people. And what happened is this. In May 22nd, to be precise, 2 statues of one man named Victor Schellcher have been destroyed, one in the city that bears his name, the city of Schellcher, and one in Fort-de-France. And behind this, you have a group of people led by 2 of our young ladies, 2 of these young ladies, and they came out on camera to say it was us. They did that. They came out on camera. They're not afraid anymore. And that's the change that we've seen now, that the younger generation, they're not afraid to step out and say, we did that, we're responsible. Although they didn't do it alone, and they did that. Everybody knows it was them. And the French government and the French justice system, they were eager to go after these kids. But they saw on social media that almost everybody, even people who before would say, oh no, this is not the way, you should not break anything, blah, 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 were like, if you touch one hair on the head of these children, there's gonna be a war. So they just, to this day, there's no word about, suing them or anything. Apparently they've dropped the idea of going after them, legally. But what happened is that one of them she's been attacked recently by French police officer, but it's not really a police, it's more like their army, their military, if you like. We call them the gendarmes. So they're only called in situations when you have riots and stuff like that. And we had no riots, but they've been called anyway. And they're mostly French people, white people who are being sent here. They don't live here, they're sent here like for a space of 2 or 3 years at a time, and then they go home. And these people, I'm sure they didn't do it like at random. They targeted this sister, this young sister called Alexandre. And she's the one that went on camera, said, it was me for the statues, And they just sprayed gas. It's really like tear gas, I think you call it, in her face, like this, like really, it was not even 1 meter away from her face, and they just sprayed her like this for no reason. She'd done nothing really stupid, like, or bad that day. She was just standing there in front of them and just like, psh. And that's what we're facing now. It's like, the more we talk, the more we break things, the more we defy them, the more they're getting violent, because they know that behind the symbols, it's something more, because more people want independence from France. And that's what they don't want. So I, as a person, not as a member of any organization, I've been fighting and campaigning for several things. One of them was the removal of some names in schools, because I have 2 little kids. One is 13 and the other is 10. And in my 10-year-old school, there was this name, which is the name of a colonial, clerical man. And I was like, how the hell this is possible? I mean, in France, they keep telling people that the state and the church are separate, blah, 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 blah. So even if you don't consider the role of that person in colonialism, just the fact that he's a cleric should be enough for them to remove the name. And apparently the rules that are supposed to be applying to us as well here, because we're supposedly French, they apply to us only when they want to, when it suits them. So I was like, I went after them because I'm a parents rep, and I went after them and I was like, we need to change this. And I pushed with the people from the city hall and city council, you know, on the school board. I pushed them and they were like, well, we're thinking about it, blah, blah, blah. And I sent them the research I did, because I did research on the names of schools, and I provided them with information about names that they could be using instead of these names and stuff, because these names were problematic, not just in my girls' school, but in other schools as well in the city. And what they did is like they waited for 3 years or 4 years or something. And then they changed one school, not my kids' school. They changed one school's name and they said it was their idea. I don't mind that. And it's only the one that they changed. But apparently this is something that the people were waiting for. So this is the good news, because before people would not have cared. Now you can see that they do. So this is a step forward as far as I'm concerned. And I've been also, I've been trying to get people to see that we also need to remove symbols in the digital space, because the space that we are living in is not just the physical space anymore. We have the digital space to fight as well, because we are represented by symbols that we don't necessarily choose, because we have big corporations like the emoji, the consortium, the emoji consortium, who are choosing like the emojis that represent countries and whatnot. And the flag they're using for Martinique, for example, is not our flag. That's a big tension for us, because what they're using is actually a flag that used to be on slave ships for both Martinique and St. Lucia. And a lot of us, like my generation, I'm 43, for years and years when we were little, we were being told that this was the flag of Martinique. We've been lied to. And this was never the flag of Martinique. And even last year or 2 years ago, our young militants and activists, they managed to get the information up to the French president of the Republic. And of course, he was embarrassed because they did this on TV and he had to say something. So he said that this is not possible. We have to get rid of this. So we managed to get rid of this on, you know, official buildings, because it was on official buildings, but we still need to remove it from the digital space. And so this is an ongoing struggle that we have. Apart from that, last week, we've had people burning also statues. The one that they burned was the one of Denambuc. And it's also something that should have been done a long time ago, but it didn't happen in an organized way, if you will. Like, people here are very volatile, should I say. So it's like, because that little sister I mentioned before, because she's been gassed, and because one of our activists as well has been beaten badly injured by the gendarmes as well last week, in retaliation, people, they just burned down the statue. That's how things happen sometimes here in Martinique. We're very, you know, reactive like that. Maybe sometimes if you talk to people, they will not do anything, but if you touch somebody, you know, things just go up in flames, and all the talking you've been doing, you thought it was for nothing, suddenly it goes to the head, and it's like, suddenly it all makes sense, and boom, action. So it's like, sometimes it goes very slow, and at times it just like fast forwards, and we never know. So that's the work that we're doing here in this terrible place that they still call a tropical paradise, because they like to trick us like that, but yes.
Thank you so much for that, Sister Bella. Yeah, we went to Martinique 2 years ago. Like I was saying earlier, we actually had tried to have dinner at a restaurant right above that monument you're talking about. And we got to see symbols reflected in not just systems, but like cultural attitude, because we got some really shady treatment that, you know, we felt was some real internalized colonization at work. And then we go outside and we get to see the opposite of it, fortunately, because we see that there's a lot of resistance going on down there. So shouts out to Martinique, and I can't remember the name of that group, but the Pan-African, you know, organizers out there who showed us nothing but love. Who was dancing to the, what was it, Bele, something like that. Bele. And what's the fighting?
Bele.
What's the fighting style called again? It's something with a D.
Yeah, it's Bele, and we've got that's Bele, and I forgot the other name. We've got a lot of them, but they're all revolve around drums, basically. It's like about drum music.
I got it. No worries, but just saw some Martinique love. And yeah, something wild about the Caribbean is always on a cutting edge. A lot of us don't even realize how a lot of our revolutionary theory was coming right through the Fanines before it even got to our, you know what I'm saying, our Panthers in the 60s and things of that nature. And I love the juxtaposition of before Floyd was even murdered by the pigs up here, y'all had just knocked that down almost like an omen of it's time, you feel me? And as soon as y'all did that, and then the Floyd thing happened, it's been on fire in this country and around the world. So thank y'all for the work, keep it going. We heard about one of your revolutionaries, a sister named Faniwa. We met when we was out there. Who helped get us set off by, quote unquote, vandalizing, we like to call beautifying the Columbus statue. And that led to it getting removed. And then I heard they tried to, you know, threaten her with jail time for that. So I hope that she's in good hands. And I'm glad to hear that the young sisters are, you know, that those bullshit charges got wiped away. But we met the sister Faniwa, and you can give us an update on our next speaker because he knows her personally. By way of the recommendations of my good brother out in TNT, brought me out there a few years ago to speak at the Kwame Ture Lecture Series. This brother's been leading the work with the Crossroads Freedom Project because they got their own manifestation of white supremacy by way of Cecil Rhodes in Trinidad. And we're going to hear more about it. I'm going to drop his bio in the chats, and y'all go ahead and give it up for Shabaka Kambon.
Greetings, my brother. How are you?
I'm good, brother. Good to see you, man.
Sister Angela, Sister Bella, boy, Martinique. Martinique is such an inspiration for the rest of us here across the Caribbean. I'm just getting the news about Desnambouk, however. That is news to me. I'm gonna need you guys to fill me in on that one. That burning of the statue last week. That's something we haven't been able to celebrate yet. All right. So let me just give everybody a quick feel for the work that we're doing. I'm gonna try to share my screen here. Let's see, host disabled participant screen sharing. Mike, is that you or Angela?
Shabaka, let me see if I can turn it over to you real quick.
Yeah, I just want to be able to share the images from our project here. Brother Todd, thank you for your presentation. And that brother, what's his name, who shared from his car? What of that, brothers?
Quest, you'll need to do it. Quest, it needs to come from your side.
Okay, how do I do that? Can you talk me through it real quick?
Yeah, just hover over the camera that's above, next to Shabaka's name.
Okay.
And then you'll be able to change it over. And
do I need to change him, make him a co-host, to make him a host?
Yeah, just make him a host.
All right, go for it.
All right, let's see if this will work.
You got it.
Yeah, you got it. Thank you.
Yeah, all right, share. Boom. Are we getting that, brothers and sisters?
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, that's it. Wait a few. Okay, there we go. It's not coming up. Okay, there we go. Right. Okay, now I can move it properly. Right. Okay, so this is basically our logo here, which is subject to some change. We intend to rebrand very shortly to the Caribbean Freedom Project, with Crossroads as one of our projects, which will focus on monuments. In particular, the main thing across the Caribbean, what we call the one of the most sacred rituals of colonialism, the monuments to Christopher Columbus, which I'll talk about in a minute. but the Freedom Project will focus on all kinds of human rights issues overall, and we intend to really expand on that. So I'll leave that there for now. Our first project was called Rename Milner Hall. And just to bring you an update, Milner, Alfred Milner, Sir Alfred Milner, was the right-hand man of Cecil Rhodes. Rhodes died in 1902, one of the richest men in the world, having realized the material benefits of colonialism. His seminal contribution was the violent subjugation and exploitation of the peoples of the southern cone of Africa and the establishment of the apartheid system. Some of his quotes, I prefer land to niggers. He said that the Africans, he contended that the Europeans were the finest race in the world and that the natives must be treated as children. Beyond being a white settler colonialist like his good friend Rhodes, Milner was an intellectual of white supremacy, a leading exponent of social Darwinism, which was the thinking of the period at the turn of the 20th century. In South Africa, during the Boer War, 1899 to 1902, he was a pioneer of the first concentration camps of the 20th century, which would eventually, people would suffer all over the world in these concentration camps, including the Jews, including people in Kenya, the Mau Mau people, and so on. He was the pioneer of the concentration camps. In the post-war Reconstruction era, starting in 1905, he established the Native Affairs Commission, which proposed a comprehensive solution to what they call the native problem, which included the territorial segregation of land ownership and living along racial lines in South Africa. So he was very much at the beginning, right there, the genesis of the apartheid state in South Africa. In his later career, this is post-1905 now, he became the colonial secretary for the colonies here in the Caribbean. In that position as colonial secretary, he was responsible for, he was one of the chief authors of the Balfour Declaration. So that fight you have between the Israelis and the Palestinians that's ongoing, that causes so much suffering, Milner was right at the center of that as well. And of course, he played a huge role in trying to stop the burgeoning West Indian nationalism that was growing at the time in the post-World War I period, when our greats like Arthur Cipriani, Uriah Buzz Butler from Trinidad Tobago, Norman Manley in Jamaica, Clennell Wickham in Barbados, all these people came back home from World War I. That's Norman Manley, the father, not the prime minister from Jamaica. But when they came back after World War I, Milner was there to try to, from his position in the colonial office, to try to thwart their attempts to move towards independence in the Caribbean. He wrote in an official memo, "Nothing we can do will alter the fact that the black man has begun to think and feel himself as good as the white man. He had observed that the experience of war their experience in World War I had given these African Caribbean troops a new sense of self. The way that they had been treated, he observed that made them really sensitive to white supremacy and colonial violence, and he knew that they were going to go back home and start that independence process, and so he tried to thwart that. What makes him, how he got his name on the University of the West Indies, the oldest hall on campus, was because he was the originator of the predecessor to the University of the West Indies, which was called the Imperial College of Tropical Agriculture. And many people in the Caribbean think that that's where our grandparents went to get an education. No, it was not. It was where settler colonialists were trained in the science and art of tropical agriculture, so they could go and dispossess natives in Africa and Asia of their land, effectively take their land from them. Milner was also a writer. He wrote a book called the Credo, which was a Bible of white supremacy. and his most famous quote is, "I am a racist, I am an imperialist." And so you would think that when we went and we exposed this information to our people here in the Caribbean, you know, through our activism, that there would be this immediate outpouring, this positive response, and people would say, "Oh my God, we didn't know, let's get rid of this guy." That was not the case. This is the genesis. This is the beginning. Before we move past this photo here, you can see Brother Kes Moore. This is that historic day in June 2017. I think it was the 22nd or the 24th of June, where we actually handed the letter over. And on the left-hand side of the picture, you see Sister Cleo Lake. Next to me, Sister Shabaka from Guyana, an international group coming together to hand this letter that initiated the process that led to the fall of Milner in the following year, to the secretary in blue of the principal of the St. Augustine campus. The principal at the time, Mike, was actually hiding in his office. He refused to come out to receive the letter from us because he understood what it was about, and he would do everything in his power, that is Professor Brian Copeland, to try to stop this historic process from taking place. Of course, he failed to do so. We were able to get Sir Hilary Beckles, that is our progressive vice chancellor, involved in the issue. And he came over to the University of West Indies and gave a powerful presentation explaining to students that, that Milner was going to be charged posthumously for crimes against humanity. This is the Beckles who's in charge of the Global Reparations Project right now coming out of the Caribbean. Progressive, great intellectual and so on. On the right-hand side of this photo, you'll see a man holding his heart. So after Beckles says all the things I just shared with you about Milner in his very poetic and brilliant manner, this guy kneeled down on one foot, put his hand across his heart and started chanting, "Milner, Milner, Milner." He loved Milner and he wanted to keep Milner on his hall. Let me just go back for one quick second. On the right-hand side of this photo, you will see the great Henry Sylvester Williams, the man who gave the world the term Pan-Africanism. When he set up the first Pan-African Congress in the world in 1900, he was a Trinidadian. He also went to South Africa, where he fought Alfred Milner. He tried to stop that process of, when Milner was setting up apartheid, he tried to undermine that process until Milner kicked him out of South Africa. We thought it would be poetic justice if this Trinidadian would then get his name honored on the hall. Of course, the principal of the University of West Indies and the students at the University of West Indies disagreed. This is a student forum that took place before Kes came to Trinidad. And you will see in the photo on the top right-hand side, the chairman of the hall, dressed in a purple t-shirt with a microphone in his hand. He said, "Slavery, we should be grateful for slavery and colonialism." And all those students around him supported him in that idea. And therefore, we should not critique the honoring of people like Milner and so on. So what I'm trying to get at here is that in the Caribbean, the process, the colonial process of conditioning into us, branding our minds with white supremacy, establishing that self-hate, has been very profound, very strong. And so when we started off our activism with the Rename Milner Hall, we thought that we would get the university students, not just in Trinidad, but in Barbados, in Jamaica, across the Caribbean, to join us. And that would make our effort to remove monuments to white supremacy much easier. That was not the case. We discovered that there was a kind of, you know, a depth of self-hate and colonial thinking. What Ngugi wa Thiong'o talks about when he describes the colonization of the mind, the empires of the mind, they were very, very strong with our students here at the University of West Indies. So this forum you're looking at here, we had a brother from Harvard. We had the former chair of the Department of History at the University of West Indies speaking. We had all kinds of artists and so on coming to share. And none of this moved these young people. They were determined to keep Alfred Milner. in this process of activism, of course, I was kicked out of the University of West Indies and declared persona non grata. You can see in the photo there. This is when they tried to remove me physically from the University of West Indies. They said no photography, no videography, no live streaming. And of course, I did not agree with that. I put a recorder on the table for the meeting that they were going to have to discuss the forum, the change of name. And they disagreed with that. By this time, they had already given me 2 cease and desist letters. They were trying to threaten me with legal action for the work that I was doing, to quiet me down, to shut me up. None of this worked. Now, here's the end of the thing. We won out in the end, but I want you to look at this photo. This is the renaming of the hall from Milner Hall to Freedom Hall. We were not invited to the renaming ceremony. And I know NOLA is quite familiar with this, right? So the 2 gentlemen on the left is the Professor Brian Copeland in white and the vice principal of the University of West Indies. They were adamant that they would never change the name of the hall. There they are taking credit for changing the name of the hall. The Rastaman you see dressed in African clothes told me that his father was from Scotland and his father had blue eyes and he didn't want anything to do with changing the name of the hall. There he is taking credit for changing the name of the hall, right? So I think that is something we would want to discuss. How, when we get involved in a process, we lead it right through to the end. Just at the end, the authorities want to claim that project as their own. And of course, we cannot allow that. This is our second project, and we'll talk more about the... Yeah, the other thing is important is they refuse to change to honor any Caribbean person on the hall. Huh? That idea of changing the name to Freedom Hall might seem like a progressive concept, but it was a way to escape giving some respect to a Caribbean hero. And as we know, we need to put those heroes in front of our young people to inspire that second generation. When we remember them, they live and they continue their work. When we forget them, they cannot continue their work. So we move on now to the second project. And this is another one where Brother Kess was with me at the beginning there. It's called No Loyal Slaves. It really is a tragic situation and really gives you a sense of how bad things are in the Caribbean. Because here is a plantation, the only one that is constituted in such a way that people could go and learn. It's where hundreds or maybe thousands of students go every year to learn about slavery. And the sign at the entrance to this estate says that he invites you to pay homage to the slave master and his wife as illustrious, and describes the people he worked until death on that estate as loyal slaves. This is a really tragic situation. Well, what we did, we went in, we met with the community. These are some of the elders from the community, and we were able to convince them that the story they had been told, that this man was so loving to their ancestors, that their ancestors were loyal to him. And let me tell you, these people living in Lopino, they were trying to bury their elders as close to the tomb of Lopino and his wife as possible, because Lopino and his wife have raised tombs, so you could really pay homage to them. As you know, so all these elders were trying to bury their venerated elders next to these vampires, because the story they were told was that these vampires were good to their ancestors. A real tragedy in the making. This was some of our meetings and so on in the community. And then, of course, we had to meet with the officials to try to convince them. And this is another thing. Could you imagine that we raised this issue in 2017 and we are now in 2020 and nobody has been embarrassed enough to just go in and get that job done? And so children are still going to that estate to learn that the slave masters were loving to their ancestors who were enslaved. The DNA. Oh, this is a very interesting story. The community was convinced that they were Spanish and French. And on the day that we got there, one of the elders had done a collective DNA test. And the test was revealed after our meeting. And it turned out that they were only 2% Spanish or European, vast majority African, and second, indigenous American. And that was a huge revelation for them. And it sort of changed. That was what really won them over to our cause. Because seeing themselves as Spanish, all these black people in this community, they didn't think that this decolonial project was really something for them. But just as we thought we were going to lose this community, somebody drops on the desk a DNA test that points out, that shows them that they're African, and all of a sudden they recognize that they now have a stake in this project. So that was interesting. This brings me to the third of the projects that we launched, which was Columbus Must Fall. And really, there's so much more I could tell you, but I'm going to rush because I know we don't have too much time. And there's our statue of Christopher Columbus in the heart of Port of Spain. Now on Independence Square. So here's the man who introduced the world to colonialism, the arch primary initiator of colonialism on our Independence Square. Nobody sees the contradiction. The thing about Christopher Columbus, as I say, he is the most sacred ritual of colonialism in the Caribbean. He is the first history lesson we teach all our children. So by the time your child is 6 or 7, he gets his first lesson in Christopher Columbus. And what does this do? This is a primer for colonialism. It teaches the child that weak nations, powerful nations, have a right to dominate over weaker nations. It teaches the child that white people, their voice is the voice you have to listen to. It undermines the child's democratic principles. It undermines his or her anti-racist principles. And it really tells you in no uncertain terms that black lives do not matter. Once you can venerate someone who was responsible for that genocide on that scale, you are saying black lives do not matter. And so we think that that's a critical process. Here are some of the indigenous people, the Warao Nation, because just as we found very backward and reactionary forces in the African community, we also found them in the indigenous community. So there is a group of indigenous people who like to continue to refer to themselves as Caribs. Here they are. This is the slide with them. These are the reactionaries. And in the middle of the photo, there's the chief of the reactionaries, Chief Ricardo Barath. He insists on continuing to call his people Caribs, which is a term associated with cannibalism and savagery, which was created and concocted by the Europeans as part of their colonial project. And he was against the project. These are the Warao who supported the project. Here we are handing over a letter to the mayor's office in 2017. Here we are on the streets. Here's a young African and indigenous boy marching on October 12th for the anniversary of Columbus's landing to call for Columbus's statue to be removed. Here are some of the people holding signs and petitions and so on. And of course, on that day in 2018, the chief of the ones who, the reactionaries said that he opposed the idea of removing Columbus because if it wasn't for Columbus, he would not be here today. He wouldn't have the clothes on his back. So the clothes, the European clothes he wore had a particular value to him, which was more important than the genocide of his, the deaths of his mass murder of his own people. Here's the beautiful artwork we did. Kes said it's not vandalism, it's beautifying. Well, look at that. That is not beautiful. Package to go to a museum. That's what we did there. But they didn't like that, so they removed it. Here's the mayor. Here's the last, one of the most recent pieces of activism. We took a petition of 8,000 signatures to the mayor's office. Now, Rhode Island, from what I understand, agreed to change their name with 7,000 plus signatures. We took 8,000 signatures to the mayor's office, and he decided to recuse himself from the whole issue and handed it over to the government. One of our scholars thinks he might be a Knight of Columbus, but that's another matter. Here is the Queen of the Warao. She has been extremely strong in this conversation. In fact, on that day, she gave the mayor 7 days to remove the monument, or she said that her warriors would remove the monument. He came back. That's when he decided to recuse himself from the issue. We have the deepest respect for her. This is her here conducting a smoke ceremony. And you can see we're on the front page of 2 of the major newspapers in the country, really pushing the issue. From there, from the mayor, we took it to the prime minister and to the parliament. We got prominent Trinidadians, including the granddaughter of the man who put up the monument in 1881, to sign a petition to parliament. And now we're not just calling for the removal of Columbus, the changing of the narrative up at Lopino and Milner, which we already have, but we're calling for a committee to be established to look at all the landmarks in our country, including our coat of arms. Our coat of arms, and you all should all have a peek at that on the internet, is actually 3 ships, the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria. And that is a monument to genocide on our coat of arms. Now, Trinidadians are going to find this hard to digest, but we have to do it if we're going to find a new space for freedom and so on. Of course, the Prime Minister has finally waded into the issue, and I think that's where we are for now. How do I stop share? Right. Okay. So what can I say? I've just touched on some of the issues, and when we come to the discussion period, we could get into more detail. In particular, the way that the authorities connive to steal the thunder when we get to that point of victory. We're going to have to sit down and analyze how we deal with that. We're also going to have to look at the question of how we provide solidarity for each other. So, for example, when the sisters in Martinique took down the Shulshire monument, we immediately flew into action here in Trinidad and Tobago. We got the leaders of the Pan-African community in the Caribbean. We had to convince them, because Shulshire is an abolitionist in Martinique. I don't know how many of you all are aware of that. These sisters took down the monument of someone who actually sort of worked on the side of, on behalf of emancipation for African people. So we had to explain why it was important to remove that monument to some of the elders in our community, so they would provide the solidarity necessary so that the French state couldn't just go in and enact violence and retribution on these sisters without knowing that the rest of the Caribbean was watching, and that anything they did, they would find themselves in trouble. So that type of solidarity, we don't just have to have here in the Caribbean, but across the world, across the organizations responsible for this kind of work. Before I end, let me just salute Sister Bree Newsome. Let me let her know we have been trying to get her to come to Trinidad. We don't know why she's not answering our emails. We don't know how come we can. I don't know what's going on. We want to let her know publicly right now. I'm sitting in the Emancipation Support Committee office. We need her to come to Trinidad and share some of that fire with us in this country. We absolutely love her here, and we're looking forward to seeing her. Okay, thank you very much, my brother. And sister.
So, Bree, if the invitation was not clear, Bree, it has been made.
No, I would definitely love to come. I vaguely, like, you got to forgive me because I vaguely remember, like, getting an email at some point. Let me give you my email again because I'm definitely down to come. And it's possible that at the time that you reached out, I was, like, overwhelmed and there was a lot of stuff going on, but I would absolutely love to. Absolutely.
That's what we love to hear. I sent that email, like, I don't know, a couple years ago when he but yeah, we doing it. We here, baby. Let's go. I love it. Man, thank you, Shabaka, bro. Thank you for linking all that up, man. And you pretty much just introduced our final speaker tonight. She's gonna take us home. But the power and the beauty of, like, the analysis in the Caribbean means a lot for us, because that is such a deep well of colonial hysteria and madness. And I remember being down there and being shocked, because y'all have this wild juxtaposition of, like, this is like the root of a lot of Pan-Africanist work. And I really hope that, you know, one thing that you left out, Henry Sylvester Williams, we went to his home, and his home is like a patch of earth. Like they had just demolished it a couple of weeks before I came down there. And it was just wild to see, like, this is how you fail to venerate this guy who was like one of the princes of Pan-Africanism before we found out about, right around the same era as Garvey and all of that, you know what I'm saying? And yet all of these monuments to these white supremacists in this completely, African island, basically, is what
Brother Quest, if I could just have 1 second.
Yeah, 1 second.
To add to your point is that while we're taking down monuments, of course, we're trying to honor our own heroes. Our great Guyanese scholar, Jan Carew, said that false heroes don't simply burden our past, they burden our character as well. And he pointed us to our real heroes. And of course, one of the people we've been trying to honor is Kwame Ture. The house that I took you to in Trinidad where he grew up, we want that street named after Kwame Ture. And again, you wouldn't believe that we're getting pushed back on that. So I'm going to report to you later in the year, but we intend to get that street named after our brother Kwame Ture. So we're doing a lot of work like that. And of course, we have many, many other monuments to white supremacy in Trinidad. We have a whole community named after the generals in the Boer War. We have a square named after the most racist governor we ever had, Governor Picton, whose statue is being removed in London. He has a street named after him. We have Winston Churchill and Roosevelt from the United States of America, who was instrumental putting Japanese in the concentration camps, he ruled over the United States during the high point of the Ku Klux Klan. He is honored here as well. So we have a lot of work to do here in Trinidad and Tobago.
Yeah, man, nothing but love and solidarity and power and respect to y'all. I hope that, there's a whole lot more beautification going on out there. We see a lot of that in the States these days, and it has been a key. I hope when we get to the Q&A, Malcolm can really chime in on the power of what we have in terms of direct action with people on the ground, because that's our key, because the petty bourgeois are going to do what they do, and it's still shocking to me to see the way that they operate in TNT. But, hopefully some of that energy has passed down to y'all, something pop off in a way that it really start to materialize in terms of the change. Speaking of putting your hands on it, doing it, putting your whole body in the struggle. Our last speaker for the night, maybe want to take it back to one of them Caribbean clubs real quick and do a we got none other than our sister who gives us the namesake for the work that we do. Got to introduce you a couple of years ago. It's always great to hear you speak. I follow your tweets every day. If you ain't following on Twitter, get some of that in your life. It's like being at the action, hearing those snippets of the kind of things that we say at actions that she just dropping it all the time. So, but more importantly, doing all kind of work in ways that reflect the systemic oppression that are embodied in the symbols that she really put the fire up under our feet to start taking down in this generation. So y'all give it up, air claps, all that for Bree Newsome.
Awesome. Thank y'all so much. Thank you for inviting me to be a part of this. This is a powerful space. Thank you for the work that everybody's doing. I share the excitement that everybody's feeling around this moment and just the revolutionary energy that's in the air. I'm going to share my screen real quick so I can, I need you to allow me to share my screen. Just have some images.
Shabaka, can you go back to your, the little icon next to your name and transfer the host over to Bree?
And I'm going to move through this pretty quickly because I feel like a lot of what I want to say is just like, yes, amen, just echoing like everything that's been said so far. Let's see.
Oh, God. You know what? Angela, can you give me some advice? Is it my name up in the top right-hand side of my screen next to my image?
Yeah, where you see participants. So then you just need to scroll down to Bree's name.
Okay, good.
And hover right over the little camera where it says more.
Right.
Click more and then transfer the host skill over to Bree.
Make host. There you go.
Got it? Okay, thank you.
Okay, cool. So let me share this. And how do I go to present? It's been a long day and I can't even remember how to do Google Slides. There we go. Hold up, I see it. Okay. Yeah. So just real quick background, if there's anybody who for some reason is like not familiar with the history of the Confederate flag in South Carolina in particular. This is another instance where they're BSing, you know, they were like completely BSing about what it means, what it represented. And we all know, my folks are from the Carolinas, like Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina. That's kind of like where all of my people are from. So I grew up like seeing this symbol all the time, and we always knew what it represented. They first raised this flag in like 1962. And of course, that was like coming right at the height of the sit-in movement. The Rock Hill 9 was, you know, in addition to the A&T 4 was like a major sit-in, kind of major event within the civil rights movement. And South Carolina put this flag over their state house at that point in time. They said that they were doing it to mark the centennial of the Civil War, which would have been 1960, not 1962. And then they just kept it up there indefinitely, never took it down. It was always controversial. You know, there was long before 2015, that was the other kind of revisionist narrative that happened in 2015. And I'm sure y'all see this all the time when we start protesting around any kind of Confederate symbology. They always try to say that, oh, it just became a problem now. Nobody had a problem with it at the time. You know, why are y'all making it an issue now? But it was always an issue. And in the year 2000, they moved the flag from the dome of the Capitol to the pole on the lawn. That's where it was at the time that I took it down. And at that point, they passed this law called the South Carolina Heritage Act. And basically what that law said was that the flag, this flag could not be lowered for any reason unless there was a 2/3 approval in the State House. That's also the same year that they erected the Confederate monument that is next to the flag. It's still there. That monument is still there. And they put that there at that time as well, just to kind of like reinforce, you know, the symbology that was present. You can also see in this picture, they designed this flag to make it difficult for anybody to physically take it down. So it has like this internal pulley system. You can kind of see like how it's bolted here at the top. Like it's not like a typical, you know, flagpole where the rope is on the outside. And that's how the method ended up being, that somebody would scale to the top, because you couldn't just like walk up and take it down. And then of course, when we got to 2015, we had this horrific incident of this white supremacist who drove from Columbia, South Carolina. That's the capital of South Carolina. That's where this flag had been on display. He drove down to Mother Emanuel in Charleston, South Carolina, entered the church during a prayer meeting, and murdered 9 people. One of those people, of course, was Clementa Pinckney, who was the pastor of the church. He was also a state senator. And that's why he was given this, you know, formal procession. This is his casket being processed through the streets of Columbia, South Carolina. And you can see here where the flag is still at the top of the pole. You can't see in this image the dome of the Capitol, but they had lowered the United States flag and the South Carolina state flag to half staff, but of course left the Confederate flag up. And they were at that time saying that, well, we can't do anything about it because of the South Carolina Heritage Act, the one that they had written into law in 2000. And this, over on the left, that's the Confederate monument that they put up there at that time as well. So the group, like the primary group that was behind taking the flag down, I know some people think I just like hopped up that morning and just like did it myself. That's not what happened. This was a coordinated effort, actually by several. It was like a large network of several groups working together. But the primary group behind it was the tribe. This was a group that I had formed with several other Black folks in Charlotte, North Carolina. And for anybody that's not familiar with that area, Charlotte is just about an hour from Columbia. So that whole like Southern North Carolina, Northern South Carolina is all kind of like one region. Like Rock Hill, there's a lot of people who live in like Rock Hill and Columbia and work in Charlotte and vice versa. So very close together. So this group, we had formed really in the aftermath of Ferguson and in response to Ferguson. Came together because, I mean, everything that I've heard everybody describe about the cities and places that they're living, same thing in Charlotte. You know, we have our own long list of police brutality victims, you know, that was going on. And we just anticipated, because it just stood to reason, that everything that we were seeing in Ferguson, we would eventually see in Charlotte. And so we just kind of started meeting to, you know, figure out what could we do to build more sustained community organization, kind of in preparation for that. Did a lot of community education. We would host what we called conscious kickbacks, and folks would just kind of come together, have a meal, you know, talk about these things. We had discussed the possibility of taking down the flag, but it was never like a serious thing that we were necessarily going to try to take on. It's just that the Confederate flag in South Carolina in that region was always that thing where it was like, if we could take it down, you know, we would go for it. So what happened was, in the aftermath of the shootings, like when that really became a very real thing, and, you know, there was like all of this national focus on the Confederate flag, we had a serious discussion about, like, can we take this down? One of the folks who was in Tribe knew another group of folks. He had previously been organizing with Occupy Charlotte. And this is like back in 2012. They did a lot of organizing around the Democratic National Convention when it was in Charlotte, kind of like protesting that. And they were like majority a white group. They did a lot of stuff around environmental issues with Duke Energy and things like that. They were connected as well to a Greenpeace activist who had experience scaling trees, like doing this method of, you know, scaling a tree and kind of like staking out in the tree. And so that's kind of how that became the method. Somebody went down there and looked at it. The other thing you can see in this photo is they had this like 4-foot tall spoked fence around the flag. And so that's why we knew that we would need an additional person to help whoever scaled the pole, like hop over that fence and then stand guard as the person scaled the pole. So we got together, Tribe, this other group, had the discussion about, you know, should we take it down? Obviously we said, yes, we should. The method was very clear. We would have to have somebody who could scale the pole, you know, who could do that. There were about 3 of us who felt like we could put ourselves in that position. But we felt that for me to do it would be very powerful because I had historical connections to South Carolina. We knew that it would create a very powerful image to see a Black woman, you know, be the one to take the flag down. And I had like some background in, like, my training is actually in media and arts. So I felt, you know, kind of comfortable like dealing with, you know, cameras and you know, kind of doing the business of explaining what it was that we had done and why we did it. For the role of the other person who would have to help me over the fence and stand, we chose James Tyson. He was with the other group of, you know, environmentalists that were predominantly white. And we made that decision for a few reasons. One, we figured that James, being a white man disguised as a construction worker, if anybody were to glance over, because we had to kind of like walk, there was like a plaza area that you had to walk over before you got to the flag. You know, if anybody were to glance over, they, you know, probably just assume, oh, okay, there's some construction going on, because he would have on a helmet and I've got on my helmet and like all this rope and stuff. We also thought that it would be powerful symbolically to have a white man get arrested along with me, because part of what we wanted to demonstrate through the action was that, you know, dismantling white supremacy is not just the job of the oppressed, right? But that white folks have to put some skin in the game as well. And so that was the purpose of his presence there. Again, the method of scaling the pole was really just out of necessity because of how the flag had been set up. But knowing that that was the method that was going to be used, I really tried to use that as a way to create like this symbolic action. Right? So like take this symbol of racism and then create this new kind of like revolutionary image. That was the whole point, was like just to create this idea of, you know, of challenging the state of South Carolina. You know, we're not going to wait on the state of South Carolina to tell us that our lives matter or to do the right thing. We're just going to take direct action and take it down right now. We talked through a lot of different scenarios. We discussed snatching it in the middle of the night. We decided not to do that, one, because we didn't want to run the risk of them increasing the charges against us, you know, like maybe trying to charge us with some theft or anything, you know, a higher charge there. But we also really wanted to draw a contrast with what had happened in Charleston. So in Charleston, you had this like cowardly act of this white supremacist going into a church with a gun, you know, shooting elderly people, and then running away. This action, we were doing it in broad daylight in front of everybody, just kind of trying to show this image of defiance and, you know, that we're not going to be ruled by fear and terrorism. And that was really kind of the goal, like I said, was to create the image, like, you know, if the flag continuing to fly there for the 2 weeks or so, or a week or so, since the shootings was just like this image of oppression. And so for us to like create this image would be kind of like flipping on a light switch for some people in terms of like, you know, the state of South Carolina saying, you know, oh, we can't take it down for this reason and that reason. If I scale up there and take it down, it's showing like, no, you can take it down. Like you're choosing not to. Of course, like I have really kind of used that moment and just like the platform that it has given me to really talk. Oh, and the other thing, I have this image here of Cecil Rhodes. Somebody mentioned that earlier. When I released the statement in the aftermath, like explaining my actions, Cecil Rhodes, like the toppling of Cecil Rhodes was definitely an inspiration for what I did. And I lifted that up to make that connection to like the larger systems of oppression, the global struggle against white supremacy and colonialism, and tie all that together. And I mean, that's part of what freaked the establishment out so much. You know, I think that had it been true that I had just, you know, woken up one morning and just went down there and just like, you know, let me just snatch this down for no other reason, I don't think that that's what they wanted to be true. Like that was kind of like the image that the establishment tried to put out there in the beginning. And then when it became clear, like once we started doing interviews and stuff, and it became very clear that, no, we're really like operating with the historical analysis, you know, around these things, like we understand what we're doing. That's when they really set about trying to erase the whole narrative around how the flag came down. But I've really tried to use that flag action to really discuss property relations, like race relations and around property, really helping people to understand the ideologies behind these things. Because especially like with the Confederate flag, a lot of the reaction at that time, like when it came down, you know, it got a pretty popular response, but people were still kind of stuck in this idea of, oh, well, it's because it's the traitorous flag, you know. It was still like a very narrow kind of focus and understanding. And so I've just really put a lot, like this is something I just talk about all the time, is just like really understanding how central these dynamics over property rights are to the construct of race, and, you know, colonialism, and just like the ongoing slave economy, like people have been speaking to. Of course, we've had a lot, like everywhere else, we've got a lot of monuments continuing to come down here. This was 2017 in Durham. Activists toppled over a Confederate statue outside of the courthouse there. I think it's my understanding that these monuments, like there's the same monument that is like all across the South, and here in North Carolina we have this in front of like every courthouse. It's this same cheap manufactured, you know, Confederate statue. And so that one was toppled in 2017. One of the things that happened in the aftermath of me taking the flag down in North Carolina then passed its own version of like the Heritage Act to like protect the monument. So what happened in this situation was Durham County actually wanted to remove their statue. Like this was actually a situation where the municipality was like, yeah, let's go on and take it down. And the state intervened and passed a law taking that right away from them. And so that's when the activists toppled it. And these incidents are much more recent. The one in the top left corner, this is a statue to Ruffin. I can't remember what his first name is. I was about to call him David Ruffin. I know that ain't right. But Ruffin is this major Confederate symbol in North Carolina. He was a state Supreme Court justice. He's very known for a court ruling he made that was just like encouraging the absolute most cruelty toward enslaved people. He was a slaveholder himself. His statue just got removed from the Court of Appeals. Next to him, going clockwise, this is another Confederate statue that was in the Capitol in Raleigh. Right below that is showing how Raleigh has now removed all of the Confederate monuments that they had in the Capitol area. And right over here on the left, this is another one of those courthouse Confederate monuments. This one is in Clinton, North Carolina. And that's kind of significant because that's in the eastern part of the state. And like, if you know anything about Eastern North Carolina, that's like, you know, super duper racist. And so for folks to go out and topple a monument there is pretty significant. Like that's one of those areas where, you know, if you try to go out there and talk about like revolution, they might look at you crazy just because, you know, they know the history there. Like those are the kind of places where the sheriffs show up with guns, you know, on voting day and that kind of thing. One of the major points of focus now continues to be this portrait. This is Ruffin as well. This is a portrait to him that is on display at the North Carolina Supreme Court. So the court is like filled with all of these, the rest of the portraits are about the size of these others that you see of other Supreme Court justices, but Ruffin has this life-size portrait that sits behind the seat of the Chief Justice. And this portrait was commissioned after the Civil War. Again, like a very obvious, you know, Confederate symbol that they erected in the state. So that one is still like an ongoing point of controversy. They are like everything that y'all have been saying about the petty bourgeoisie and like the whole neoliberal way of like trying to co-opt the process. That's what's happening with the portrait now. So they have appointed this commission to like discuss, you know, taking down the portrait, and they, you know, invited me to like serve on the commission. And it's the whole thing is ridiculous. You know what I mean? Like the whole thing it's completely ridiculous. The process itself really only serves to like legitimize something that is not legitimate to begin with. And I'll come back to that in a second. And we can probably talk about that a little bit more. In terms of the work that I'm doing as an organizer, I'm really focused on housing in Charlotte, North Carolina right now. Charlotte is like every other urban city, same dynamics. We have hyper gentrification going on right now. We have Black leadership. This image I was going to show you right here. So I mentioned to you before how in 2014 we formed this collective in anticipation of an uprising, you know, happening in our city, and that's exactly what happened. So in 2016, we had the killing of Keith Lamont Scott by CMPD. Had, you know, I think over a few weeks, almost a month of, you know, protesting and unrest in the city that we, you know, kind of helped to organize and participate in. The image that you see up top here, that is one of the protesters, Braxton Winston. There was this photo that was taken of him on the front line. He then went on to run for city council and got elected. So we had this moment where, you know, we like elected new leadership. We voted out our old mayor, who was a Democrat. She was a white Democrat. Elected our first, you know, Black woman mayor. But again, you know, like everybody has been saying, that doesn't change anything. Like, unless the people who are elected are really ready to abandon these kind of like neoliberal politics, it doesn't shift anything. And so the other image I have down here is the Republican National Convention, because before it got moved to Jacksonville, it was actually supposed to be in Charlotte. And that's another example where the city, they spent $50 million getting new equipment for the police just for the convention, for the 3 days of the convention. $50 million is our entire housing budget. Like, that's the entire budget that they have allocated to the housing issue. And of course, people continue to be massively displaced. So that's kind of like where my focus has been. The interesting thing about that work, and I started with this in 2017, like immediately after the uprising, I focused in on this again because I was trying to find a way to build some more sustained organization among the people in the city. We have gotten very good at doing short-term reactionary things to whatever the city does. But in terms of like really setting our own agenda, advancing our own agenda, and having the organization that's needed to sustain that, we didn't really have that. And housing to me made sense as a place to start, because even if people were not yet engaging in a like revolutionary politic, everybody understands that the rent's too high. Everybody understands that they're being squeezed out of their neighborhoods. You know what I mean? So that was like a logical entry point. What was interesting was the flyer that I have up here. This is Justice for Lake Arbor. This was a community that, you know, again, landlord, horrible, you know, not making any repairs, collecting rent, but not making any of the necessary repairs. The tenants actually organized their own tenant association, sued the landlord, won the case, and then the way that the landlord responded was to just sell the property and kick everybody out. And of course, in North Carolina, we have like zero tenant protection in the law. Like there's like no protection for tenants at all. And it was interesting because there was this moment where the Housing Coalition was trying to decide what to do. And like half of the folks were ready to just like go out and like shut the whole thing down and be arrested. You know, like we're just gonna like be there, not allow anybody to be evicted. Other folks weren't there yet. You know what I mean? And it was just like this moment of recognizing how even when people recognize that there's an injustice, there's still a process of like education and politicization that has to happen in order for people to kind of get there, you know what I mean? And that's why I say I'm really excited about this moment, and I just kind of echo what a lot of folks are seeing and saying, in that I see people making that connection more now. Like there would have been a time when the people that I was working with in the Housing Coalition would have been like, oh, that's so great what you did to take the Confederate flag down, but they're not drawing a connection between that and property relations and being kicked out. You know what I mean? Like they're not making all of those connections. Now people are making all of those connections. So that's really good. And then the last thing I just want to touch on is, I mean, I read the questions that y'all sent, and I just think it's so funny because I was like, you know what, I'm going to talk about co-optation. And I thought for sure that was going to be like a unique thing to like, to bring up. But no, that's something that I really want to talk about too. I feel like a lot of times revolutionaries like freak out whenever we see the co-optation starting to happen. And I get that. And I, you know, I totally understand that. I also think that if the establishment is not trying to co-opt the work, that's not a good sign, because it means that they consider it irrelevant enough that they can just like completely ignore it. They start co-opting when they realize that they are losing ground. It's like the image that I'm showing here. This was, you know, South Carolina's BS ceremony that they did, like, I think it was like 2 weeks or so after I took the flag down. So this was like the beginning of their attempt to rewrite the narrative over how the flag came down. So, you know, now it's about like how Nikki Haley led the way on, you know, getting the flag down, and they had this whole dignified, you know, ceremony around, you know, lowering the flag, like it's this thing to be honored. They then went on to spend like $5 million or something to like put this flag on display in a Civil War relic museum, when this, again, this particular flag has no connection to the Civil War whatsoever. So, and that is still very much like an ongoing thing, even this year, when, you know, everything started happening and there started to be this kind of like revisiting of what had happened 5 years ago. The Post and Courier put out this story, this article about the flag coming down, and completely wrote me and the action out of that narrative entirely. So it's still like an ongoing thing. But I say all that to say that when I see that happening, I actually take it as a good sign, because I can tell they're scared. I can tell that they are trying to figure out how to make up for this ground that they have clearly lost. And I think that what is really important for us to do on our end is to figure out how to build upon that. Like, how are we using that to remind everyone and educate the people who just became aware, right, of what's going on, about what actually happened, like how change actually happened. Because, and the reason that I say we have to be careful sometimes about just like freaking out about it, is that there are a lot of people who become activated in the moment and they are like new to the issue, and they don't know about co-optation. They don't know about all the work that's going on behind the scenes. And if the first reaction is just to be like, you know, or you're wrong in terms of your, you know, your understanding, or just to kind of like shut it down completely, then we can actually lose some of the ground that we've gained. And to that end, the other thing, or other two things that I'm really interested in right now is media justice, right? So I'm working on a documentary project right now about the situation in Charlotte. But part of what I'm trying to do with that is provide people in Charlotte with cameras and training on how to document their own stories so that we can start like setting our own narrative, documenting our history, documenting our stories, and like just framing the whole understanding. Because the way that Charlotte has dealt with this whole issue of gentrification is kind of like, you know, it just happens. We're a booming city. This is great. We've got, you know, we're the banking capital of the South. And oh gosh, you know, it's unfortunate that, you know, we've got 90-year-old folks that are losing their homes. You know, gosh, you know, I wish we could do something about it. Here's a little bit of change. You know, we'll try to do something to give some homes for some people, and otherwise we're just going to keep it rolling, right? And the only way that we can really combat that is through setting our own media narrative around the understanding of, you know, what is actually happening. The other thing that I'm interested in, but I'm not directly involved in, I would be interested to either become a part of it or to support it if it's already happening, is really creating educational curriculum. And people have kind of lifted that up already. That was the other thing I wanted to echo, but I think that is really key. Like, what are we doing to provide, like, you know, we're looking at the situation of students possibly being home, right? Like, what are we doing to provide curriculum that they could be studying right now? Like, imagine being 10, 11 years old and you're seeing everything that's going on around you. Is there something we could put in their hands right now that would give them, you know, that kind of education and awareness? And I think that's it. I was trying not to drag on too long, because I feel like a lot, like the whole time I've just been sitting and listening and just being like, yes, yes, absolutely. But yeah, that's basically where I'm at right now. And I just think that, like I said, my background is in media and communications, so I'm kind of, you know, biased. I see things through that lens, but I really don't think you can overstate how powerful, how absolutely powerful media and imagery and symbology is. And if it weren't, they wouldn't fight so hard on this. If it weren't, they wouldn't have made monuments like one of the first things that they did when they colonized the land. Like, when the first thing they do is they come and they put up a big old statue, you know, to the colonizer. So every day that's all you see. And I can't remember who it was that was mentioning the naming of the schools as being like the first point of indoctrination, but that's absolutely true. Like, it's like a process of brainwashing. And I think the only way that we can really combat that is to create just a massive amount of our own content and cultural production.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that, Bree. You literally are speaking like everything I was like talking to myself about right before we got on this call tonight. And I was thinking, Taking Down NOLA put our first zine out a couple of years ago. We're finalizing our second one right now. And as I'm looking at this landscape, that's exactly what I was thinking in terms of like, wow, if we could fill in this void right now, if there was a build 'em up, because we have, like Angela was saying at the beginning, a build 'em up component, like a build 'em up curriculum where, you know, young folks especially need context for all of this madness that's going on. And we have provided that access point, that lens, like you say. And I'm marveling at the fact that so many people that gravitated towards this work quite often were folks who came through media, artistry, symbolism. I know Bella does graphic design kind of work. You do the media thing. Shabaka was a former journalist. I'm a poet first and foremost and an educator. Most of us are educators. So it's symbols, you know what I mean? It's like, go back to the cave, like cavemen, like you put something on a wall. That's the first thing you can access after you take care of your basic economic needs. You know what I'm saying? I eat, I got shelter, and now I want to communicate. And I'm going to communicate something that reflects this lived experience. And so when we look at the landscape, for me, that's why, you know, learning from Malcolm a decade ago, we just lit the fire, the bonfire in my head, because I was like, oh, snap. That's what it is. This is really what we're living in. And everybody doesn't get it immediately, but, you know, people got it now. And so we have all these access points in terms of like all of these lanes we could go down, from the housing to the miseducation system, to the injustice system, to food deserts, to all of that, and tethering it all to, we used to be inside of shacks where we had to eat, you know what I'm saying? You know, whatever part of the pig was left. And to this day, we still got to eat whatever's part of the hood is left until, you know, the gentrifiers come in and they want to give us a nice, you know, fancy grocery store, whatever. But all that to say, a lot of connections made tonight, y'all. I appreciate y'all. You know, in the pre-COVID world, we would be in somebody's city right now. We would be getting ready to, you know what I'm saying? Like, I could do this all weekend, forget the night. Like, typically what we would do is the next day we get together, do some planning sessions. We'd be out there in the streets and we go take it to whatever the targets are in your side, in your neck of the woods. But, you know, we're in a beautiful moment. People are doing that without us right now. And I think a big part of how we can start to assist is the fact that, first of all, we only scaling the surface. So even while this revolutionary moment does knock down 100 in the last couple months, there's still going to be like 1,500 left when it's over, unfortunately. So we still got work to do. I think what we did tonight was powerful. We got a teaching tool that can get out to a lot of these organizers to give even deeper context to the kind of work they're doing. We can expand and build out our ranks. And, you know, when all of this smoke clears, hopefully we will be in the flesh in somebody's city together. If we got to all go down to the Caribbean, take it back up to the Carolinas, whatever the case may be. Shouts out, by the way, to the brethren out here from Louisiana, Niles Hamer, holding it down, lone soldier out there in that town trying to get a Confederate statue removed from in front of a courthouse out there. And I commend you, bro, because, you know, I know you're doing that like a one-man army right now, but I know it's building. And it's those kind of targets that we should be able to reinforce, you know, just like, you know, old school civil rights days. But that's it. I'm gonna stop running my mouth. We have gone way over time, but this is right on time because everybody's still here. So I'm assuming that y'all still won't get it in. I want to give us some time to do a little talking out and Q&A if folks are available to do that. If you got to hop off, you know, by all means, do your thing. But let me just drop a couple of plugs in terms of our work, how you can stay engaged, because most of us are from right here in Louisiana. Follow us on the social media. Most of y'all probably already do that. You should also follow all of these amazing organizers who are here. Y'all can drop your social media in the chat right now. Don't let me forget, I do have the documentary link to the Counter and Coasting movement. Take them down. We got a little feature up in there. And I'll drop that so y'all can learn about our sister Cleo's work, because she couldn't be here tonight. It's like 3 o'clock in the morning over there. Our next Take Them Down Everywhere conference should be next spring, hopefully. And everybody that's on this call, we would love for y'all to be there again. The way it's looking, it might be another call, but that's fine. You know what I'm saying? Next time we'll find a way to, you know, build this out and bring in some new workers. If it can be in flesh, even better. But we'll be having consistent organizing calls around that monthly as soon as we start organizing, probably sometime this fall. So anybody who's down to help out with number 4, come on through. We with it. Also, I mentioned earlier about our actions. We got an action this Saturday. We're going to be in the streets with our New Orleans Workers Group fam, highlighting the plight of essential workers out here in the city. Our brother Biggie is chairing that. He's on a call, so later on, if you want to speak on it, you can do that. Y'all can meet us out 6 o'clock, Kaminsky Park this Saturday. If somebody got the flyer, you can drop it in the chat. We do weekly actions at this point. Take them down. Spearheads at least one of those a month. So y'all can keep rocking with us. I've talked to everybody who's doing campaign work in the city. Dismantle NOMA, I see y'all. No More Lee, Pride of Lusher, and I think there's one more who's present tonight. But yeah, y'all should keep coming out to the actions. And then last but not least, we do monthly forums for both New Orleans Workers Group, and Take Them Down is going to get back on doing those consistently as well. So highly recommend y'all get the New Orleans Workers Group forums in your life. We got one coming up this Sunday. You could be way out in the Caribbean and still catch some of this, dropping major gems around the plight of workers. This Sunday is going to be about the solidarity necessary between unemployed and employed workers, and just seeing that we all workers out here, basically, whether you on the books or not. whether you got a job right now or not, we're all under attack by this, you know, corrupt, decaying capitalist system at this point. So we need to be banding together. So that's everything we got. I hope to hear some final words from Brother Malcolm, if he's still here, and Angela before we close out, if y'all can. But before we get to that, I want to open up, especially to our special invites this evening from here in New Orleans and other comrades, take them down. If you got any questions or comments for Bree, Shabaka, Bella, I think Gary stepped off, or Wells, if he's still here, feel free to drop them in the chats.
Do y'all need me to transfer the hosting back over?
Yeah, can you do that, please?
How do I, tell me again how to do that?
So just come hover on top of my little 3 dots over here, like the little blue
Got
button.
you, okay.
Yeah, and then just switch it over. Cool. All right, y'all, look like we got a bunch of thank yous. Maybe folks is just overwhelmed with the information right now. If anybody got a question, if anybody's got a question, or even just a comment, if you want to say it out loud, you could.
I have a question, comment, whatever. I feel like it's just so important, and I'm so glad that so many folks talked about the co-optation piece. I feel like it is definitely a bridge in the here and now moment as we witness movements and victories of grassroots organizing and revolutionaries being co-opted by neoliberal minions, the minions of capital, how that's a kind of teaching tool in live action about how these statues themselves are revisionist history, right? That is a necessary component in that kind of twisting, right? And folks who may be new to organizing or new to like revolutionary thought, or even just stepping out into the street, when we're talking about how these things, these symbols are historical legacy of revisionism. Look how right here in the here and now that revisionism is happening for the children of our future, right? Like how those, our victories, our revolutionary victories are twisted, contorted to be a tool to feed lies in revision to our youth and those who are not even yet here, right? So I think it's like, yes, definitely necessary. It shows that we're doing the right thing when when co-opters try to prey upon revolutionary and grassroots movements. But it's also a lesson to those who are organizing and those who are just stepping into organizing about what that looks like in real time.
Can I just say I completely agree? And like, that's one of the things that's actually been encouraging to me about what I've seen in the past few months is like, people have actually been really pushing back. Like there's actually been, because there was a massive attempt to co-opt the energy around abolishing police and, you know, do this like this whole coordinated 8 Can't Wait campaign. And people successfully mobilized and pushed back and shut that down. And, you know, they continue to try to do it and it's not been successful. And so that's really powerful.
Absolutely. I see you trying to say something. Go ahead, Shabaka.
You're on mute.
You're on mute,
Shabaka.
Right. Yes, my brothers and sisters. I think first let me acknowledge that
everybody froze, Shabaka. Try it again, you froze up.
Okay, right. Everybody hearing me?
Yes.
Right. So I'm saying the reason, one of the main reasons for co-opting is to silence us. They recognize that our agenda doesn't stop at the monument. And therefore, if you can get us out of the picture, then you could get our agenda out of the picture. So that's really important. One of the ways that we could combat that is collectively to acknowledge and celebrate each other's work wherever we are. So for example, whenever I speak about the work of Taking Down NOLA and about Kes and Angela and Malcolm Suba I speak about Sister Bella and Sister Faniwa in Martinique and brothers and sisters in the Bahamas and Barbados. It's important for us to do that in our writing, in our public presentations and so on, so that, you know, because you can only tell us a false narrative for so long. The truth is going to come to the fore, you know. So we've never really bothered to engage University of West Indies, for example, for sort of writing us out of their official narrative. We've just kept doing our work, but we know that the time will come when everything will come to the fore, you know. And a lot of people have already, you know, celebrate our contribution in that regard. So we have to, you know, and of course I want to acknowledge what Sister Bree said. She's making a very solid point there. So we don't want to get too excited when they try to co-op. We understand that it means that our work has had some impact, and it's also a reflection that we're winning. But of course, as I said, we have to be careful not to be silenced too far that we can't get through with our full agenda, and they narrow our agenda down. Thank you.
Can I add something?
Absolutely.
Yes, just what Shabaka just said is really important. The fact that he's speaking about us is really more important than you know, because we've been divided by the language barrier, and it was not an accident. It's done on purpose, right? Because, you know, if we start working with you, we are a bigger threat to the system and to the oppressors. And that's also why I feel it's my duty as well. Every time I see people speak, like, and it shows that they don't know that there's something going on in Trinidad, in New Orleans and whatnot. And I feel it's my duty to say, hey, we have brothers taking down statues over there. We have, you know, take them down NOLA and Crossroads, you know, and stuff like that. And I every time I have the chance to do that, I do it, because I know a lot of people here don't speak English, don't understand English, written or spoken, and they don't know. And it's a whole system. The system is made in a way that language learning is basically stripped off what it could be or should be. So yeah, we have to fight that too.
Sister, let me just take the opportunity to say to you that I'm here on the internet. I have a colleague who is going through the images and the live video of you guys burning that statue of Desnambuk, and it makes us so happy. Can you convey our joy to the brothers and sisters?
I will.
All right.
I just like to say Bella was really inspiring to me as a mom. Layla's going to Chateau Estates. So although it's not a white supremacist in particular's name on the school, it's the big house, right? So I'm grateful for not the pandemic, but for how the universe has unrolled things that I have the opportunity to keep her home and teach her some Black curriculum, some real Black history, especially with her going into 2nd grade. I think I'm grateful for the universe, and power to us mothers who are doing the hard work of raising the next generation and fighting and healing from past trauma, and so much love. This was really illuminating, y'all.
Yeah, I think it's important for us to understand that, especially in the United States, there's a big cultural shift that's taking place around the ruling class support for the white supremacy movement. The NASCAR discarding the flag and state of Mississippi discarding the flag are very big cultural moments. And as well, the NBA has adopted Black Lives Matter as the message that's going to be on all the basketball courts during this shortened season. And so we should realize that all those these concessions are meant to not express liberal values, but actually are used to try and ice us out of any momentum in terms of winning people to a revolutionary stance on this, and seeing this struggle as part of the overall liberation struggle. And so we have to make sure that we indicate to our supporters and our followers that the struggle has not been won, even though spontaneously people are taking these things down. This is just a wolf in sheep's clothing, and that we've still got to fight against the whole white supremacist project, which of course includes the very real existential things that, about keeping food on the table and keeping our dignity, that is an everyday struggle. And we've got to make sure it's always linked to what we're doing.
One of the things I saw recently that was real interesting, I can't remember who did the survey, but the results from the survey was that like the majority of people supported Black Lives Matter, but they didn't support, did you see that? But they didn't support abolishing or defund, like they didn't support any of the aims of it, right? So it's like they're reacting to the brand, they're reacting to the establishment embracing this phrase Black Lives Matter. And I think what I'm saying is, what I see happen a lot of times in situations like this is folks sometimes get frustrated and throw up their hands. Are like, we're not going to say Black Lives Matter anymore because folks are co-opting it. Or I've seen people say taking down the monuments doesn't matter because, now it's become like the thing to do. And I think instead of doing that, what would be good is to like claim that ground, right? Like if we're in this push back and forth, right, and the establishment pushes back this way, then what we should just do is like take a step further, right? Like, no, it is Black Lives Matter. Let's talk more about what the aims of it actually is, instead of just like walking away and just like ceding that whole territory to the establishment. Like we could, I know everybody on this call is not doing that. I'm just saying I see that happening a lot of times when co-optation comes up, is folks kind of cede it to the establishment. Like, oh, okay, now taking down monuments and painting murals and cultural production has become the domain of the establishment, so we're going to let that go. And I don't think we should let anything go. I think that we take it and we continue to push them further and further.
I want to both acknowledge the wisdom of our elder, Brother Malcolm Suba, in terms of his analysis, and I think it's something we have to consider very seriously. And the position that Bree has shared with us there, I think that's really, really important that we claim that space. I also want to share with you from the Caribbean point of view, the work that you all have done in the United States of America has really opened up the space for us here to make some gains as well. So we fully intend to use this opportunity to push through certain reforms that we've had on the back burner there in the education system and content, to highlight the level of discrimination in terms of how the budget for education is organized in Trinidad and Tobago, and the amount of money that's been given to national security, in particular the police, vis-a-vis everything else. All those things, what the work that African Americans have done, and I want to salute every single African American person, has, and it's not just here in the Caribbean, but all over the world, we're able to move 1 or 2 steps forward because of that work and because of the sacrifices that you guys have made. So even as I acknowledge Brother Suba, because he has that wealth of experience to see how the system is maneuvering the chess game that is at stake. We want to also acknowledge what Bree is saying and the opportunity that we do have still, while the iron is hot, while there's this massive global shift in popular consciousness, to make some changes, some radical changes.
Yes. Awesome. Do we have anyone else that wants to make a final comment before we give these closing shares for you all? It's been a powerful night.
I want to ask about there's some African Americans who we speak to in some of the other forums who are uncomfortable with the degree of white control, I would say, over the Black Lives Matter movement. Could anybody say that for me from this group?
Well, I can tell you that that would probably be another hour-long conversation right there, Shabaka. But I'm going to just share with you what we've been telling people here. We are very clear that there is work that we have to do together as it relates to a multinational, multi-generational, multi fight to be able to dismantle capitalism, heteropatriarchy, white supremacy. But within that fight, as it relates to white people, we have been telling folks that we don't need white people to tell us what to do or to direct or guide the movement. What we need white folks who stand in solidarity with us to do is be about the business of organizing other white people to move out of the way as we engage in this work of self-determination in pursuit of our liberation. So for every opportunity there is for white people to hinder the movement, slow it down, tell us what to do, try to grant us out of our revolutionary activity, on and on and on, because we're saying that at all of our engagements, we're now having a reference point to hold people accountable that are within reach of us. Because we understand that there's a work that we have to do as Black people, not only fighting everything that we fight, but the internalized oppression that we deal with, and there's work that white folks have to do. And then in the times and moments where we can actually do that work, we're able to move together. We don't have to be doing the exact same work at the exact same time, but we do need to be moving in the same direction, which is dismantling the systems of oppression and exploitation that we're experiencing. And here we're saying to white people that the system doesn't care about poor white people either. And the more white folks that we have that are brave enough to say, we're gonna turn our frustration, our concerns, and even our love for Black people, we're gonna turn that toward the system and start confronting that system to make it just a little bit maybe easier for us to move forward in self-determination in pursuit of our goals. So even here when we're talking about reparations, we don't necessarily need yet white folks to be in the streets with us as we're fighting for reparations. What we need you to do is ensure that as we are doing the work to build with Black people, elevate consciousness, that you're not interfering with that. And so that's one of the current messages that we have right now. And it's not to say that over time that work doesn't change, but what I've come to realize is that, you know, white folks don't want to spend a lot of time in the face of other backward white people. And we understand that, but it's going to require that, because all of the people who are supporting even Trump, they don't realize that they're being exploited by that man. And I, as a Black woman, could spend all of my time trying to educate white people about, but there's a whole bunch of white people who say they stand in solidarity with Black Lives Matter who could be actively doing that work. Actively doing that work. And so
Angela,
we don't mince words around that.
Angela, let me just ask one more question.
Mm-hmm.
In my engagement with the indigenous American community in the United States of America, I don't often get the impression that they're engaging the African community enough, that there's enough of an engagement between progressive organizations like your own and the indigenous Americans, you know, so we engage them here through one channel, and then we engage you through another channel. Is there a way to bridge that gap?
There has to. Go ahead, Malcolm, you want to speak to that?
Yeah, I mean, we understand that the two fundamental problems with the establishment of the USA, of course, was the genocide against the Native people and enslavement of the African people. We recognize the commonality in our struggle, and many of the more progressive indigenous people have always allied with our movement. And it's time that we let them know that we recognize them being the first people here, and we recognize their rights to redemption. And I think on that basis, you know, we can build the type of relationship. I mean, we've always tried to involve the Native people that are still around New Orleans in our activity. But more on a more continental scale, there's still some forces in AIM that we have relationships with, and they, but it's difficult because they are pulled by all of these agencies and treated so as non-existent by most folk, and so their fight for visibility is something that we should be promoting more.
And I'll tell you, Shabaka, that's for the last however many years, it's been an active part of our work, like, our engagement with the Homa Nation, and really talking about and having conversations about what it means to be sanctioned by the US government as a nation versus claiming to be a nation, knowing that, and what it means to organize in community around that. So there are lots of conversations happening around it, but the more that we've been having these conversations, the more has been revealed and the more solidarity has been able to be built. You brought up solidarity earlier, which is one of the reasons why we really wanted to have this call, because we're in the third year of Take 'em Down NOLA. When we had the first conference, and you were here for that, Shabaka. Last year we were in Jacksonville, and the amazing work that we've seen with Todd and Ella and the other organizers on the ground since then. As we're doing this work, we're able to go away from these calls, not just saying, oh my gosh, we had a great conversation tonight, but how can we deepen our relationships and further build in ways? And it's challenging because when we get off the calls, we get right back caught up into our worlds and our busyness. But these opportunities bring us back together to say, how can we do the work necessary to strengthen ourselves? And I think we've been spending so much time strengthening our local work now that we're in a position to lift our heads and say we have enough of a foundation to be able to reach our hand across and say we can really do some work that's sustainable. And I think that we're at that point now with all of the folks who are participating in this call. Bree said it earlier, you start this work and then you have to really reflect in your mind, is this one person, two people doing this work? Have we built organizational capacity on the ground to sustain this work? When uprisings start to come down and people start to get comfortable again, it's really important to know that we have people who are built up, not that we've just recruited people, but that we've developed them and we've retained them in this work for long-term struggle. The only reason we're here tonight is because Malcolm is a 40-year, long-time revolutionary organizer. And we are saying we have a responsibility to pass the baton gracefully. We don't want to drop the baton in anybody's lap and they're not ready. We don't want to have the baton snatched out of our hand. We want to pass it gracefully. And if that means we're doing a lap, holding it together at the same time for a while, that's the work that we have to do. Quest brought up earlier the conference, and we originally had the in-person conference scheduled for March in Alabama, but COVID-19. And so, Quest was talking about how we could pull ourselves together here, have this conversation, but also start planning toward next March, whether it be in person or not, but that we plan. And what would happen after this call is every month, we would pick back up with our monthly calls. And we welcome everybody to be on those calls, because what happens is we get a chance to update each other about our work. We get an opportunity to strategize and support each other in the work. And then we get an opportunity to say, how do we make that conference an opportunity to elevate our collective consciousness as organizers, but then be able to take that back into the streets based on what we've learned from one another. So we hope that it's the third, it always falls on the third weekend in March. And we're really hoping that people will just leave this meeting, save the date. And if you're interested in joining us for those monthly calls, could do so. And then we also want to invite you this coming Sunday, the New Orleans Workers Group that really is pushing for the political education that is behind the work that we do, the organizing of workers, worker power, and understanding labor power, and understanding that these monuments could come down tomorrow if we had organizational capacity on the ground to say, you know what, you shoot another person, you don't take these monuments down, you don't make our schools equitable, you don't provide universal income for our people during COVID-19, we'll just shut it all down tomorrow. And because we know the power of our labor and have the capacity to do that, and we're at the point now where that foundation is being laid, but we're not there yet. And until we can really do that globally, and we're looking forward to that day, we have work to do. So you're more than welcome to join us on Sunday. It's going to be at 6 p.m. Central Time. And because we have everybody's email for this invitation, we can just send that information out via email. And anybody who wants to join us, you just RSVP, join us on the line. And we want to support one another in our, growth and development and building of solidarity.
Absolutely. I was trying to find a link on Facebook, but yeah, we could email folks. That'll work too. So, yeah, y'all, thank y'all for a powerful, powerful time sharing energy, story, you know what I'm saying? Revolutionary fire and gems and game and strategy and all of that good stuff. Like Angela just said, this is the beginning of a longer conversation. We look forward to whether we can be together physically or if we have to do it like this again, continue to fortify each other's movements. I really appreciated what Shabaka had offered before, and what I saw Bree just chimed in the chat is basically, yeah, we just we're reaching out, and we do have to build each other up, because that really isn't an easy answer to offer in our landscape, in our local landscape, because we know if you look at this, if I could do like a chart right now, y'all can see it. It's like, there's going to be the grassroots here, and there's going to be the grassroots in Trinidad, and there's going to be the grassroots in South Carolina, and that's what we brought together tonight. But when you get into your city, it's a pyramid, it goes up, and as you go up that so-called hierarchical ladder, you get more and more petty bourgeois. So it's not easy to just reach out and just be in solidarity, even in your own town. You have to build that. And so that's what we've been doing with Workers Group. That's what we do with People's Assembly, Hospitality Workers Alliance, and they do the same radical approach as we do. You know what I mean? If you're going to talk about white supremacy, you got to be radical, get to the root of it. If you want to talk about capitalism, you got to be radical, get to the root of the exploitation. If you want to talk about workers' rights, environmental racism, all of that, you got to get to the root of the system. And so that's what we're doing with this. And we hope that y'all are building in your necks of the woods with similar folks. And we, the stuff y'all been talking about tonight, it looks like you are. I wish we had more time to hear from some of our young, when I say young, I just mean, young in your organizing folks who have led their own campaigns out here. And I hope that y'all got inspired tonight. I saw some of the comments in there. Corinne, Jessica, we can't wait to keep pushing with y'all with Pride of Lusher. I hope y'all can see how deep these roots go. That it's more than just the name and the symbol, but we trying to peel all of this stuff back because it's all connected. And the more you connect it, the bigger your army gets. So, yeah, if there's no further comments or questions, we're gonna...
Brother Chris, before you go, let me just let everybody know that I'm in touch with Chumani Maxwele, the guy who led the Peru protest in 2015 in South Africa that resulted in the fall of Cecil Rhodes's monument at the University of Cape Town. I think it's important that we get the brothers from the continent in our next meeting.
What's his name?
Let me know. His name is Chumani Maxwele.
I was trying to get him. I think I jumped in his DMs or something like that. Yeah, please. I was trying to get him.
He's been a little bit, I think that he's been nervous about those of us from the Americas getting in touch with him because, he's a little suspicious that those of us on this side of the Atlantic might be getting in touch with him, under false pretenses. Movements in the South tend to be infiltrated, and agents come in and they you could find yourself dead. When we get involved in this work in the South, it's deadly. People die in the South. So people like Chumani, even when I tried to reach out to him at first, he was quite nervous. But over time, and we found ourselves in a global forum recently and so on. We got to reach out to these brothers and get them involved in these kinds of forums and so on. So anytime you have another one, let me know in advance. Let me get those guys from South Africa to be here with us.
Absolutely. I'm looking at it. It was actually a brother named Sizeway or Sizeway. That's who I talked to. But I'm sure they know each other. But yeah, that's why we're doing monthly calls, y'all. And we're going to get started probably around September, October. Keep y'all plugged in. And we got, a whole lot more work to do. We got a world to win. So thank y'all for showing up tonight. Stay connected. Much love, much light. Let's take them all down.
Much
Gratitude,
love,
comrades.
good night.
Yes, indeed. And everybody, I want to see everybody in Trinidad soon, okay?
Yeah.
I'm coming to Carnival as soon as Coach.
Elder, we need that wisdom, Brother Subo. We need that wisdom down here. We're looking forward to seeing you. All right? Lots of love.
Right.
Take care.
Good night, everyone. Rest well. Beautiful.
Hey, Layla.
Hey, Layla. All right, so I'm about to.
Thank you, Bella.
Thank you so much. All right, y'all.
Good night.
It was wonderful to see rest eyes on y'all.
I'm glad you were able to be here tonight.
Yeah, me and this like mountain of laundry.
Awesome.
All right, y'all.
Good night.
Night.
Bye.